All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. I am psyched because I'm about to have what I'm sure is going to be a fantastic and fun and interesting conversation. The gentleman joining me for this chat is someone whose work I've been really diving into a lot lately. I've been familiar with his work for quite a while as well, so we have a lot of things to dive into. But first and foremost, it's my great honor to welcome Mr. Chris Frieri. Chris, welcome. Great to make your cyber acquaintance here.
Glad to see you, Joel.
Fantastic. So yeah, we got tons we can get into. Just to kind of give the viewer kind of a brief synopsis. I guess, kind of hit the radar for a lot of people in the early 80s as a musician. You were
That's really stretching out that word, calling me a musician,
a
but
person who
I'll
a
laugh.
person who made music like sounds.
Yes, yes.
Primarily with a band called My Three Sons, which we'll get into. You were also heavily involved in Buy Our Records, the classic New Jersey record label that has come up on a few occasions on this channel already. You've spent the past several years as a filmmaker. And I'm really excited to get into that topic with you. But kind of first and foremost, like you were part of really that early 80s New Jersey punk underground music wave, we'll call it.
Uh,
But for you, when and how did music first enter your orbit as an interest, and what led you to become an active participant in what was going on at that time?
oh, well, yeah, in brief, really, for me, I woke up to like when the Beatles were happening. The Beatles were like the nipple. They trickled down. Like my grandmother liked them, my parent, and my mother anyway. My father not so much, but like it was like a Kids on the Block. It really was like that popular. So that's really like the first music I really heard, and it was followed very soon by the Monkees.
Hmm.
And then it kind of spread from there. I found out about the Rolling Stones, and like when Tommy came out, I had a copy of Tommy. So and then I had an older brother, Jeff, who he was more hip to it than I was. So it's like, my parents were buying records for us. It was like it was that stuff. And then like adulthood rolled around and like all that 70s music and all that stuff. I really got into that. My brother, in fact, he's the guy who like he hit me to Slade. He brought home the Slade records. He didn't bring home the T-Rex records, but I went and got those by myself. But like, he had the Melody Maker and New Musical Express. He would get them every month or weekly or whatever they were. So I used to read that stuff, and and then I was really into like prog music. But all like the best prog bands I see now, we didn't even hear them here. Like they weren't like or not completely like you'd have to go looking for them, but they weren't like bands that were from the big prog groups were like Yes and Genesis and King Crimson. You heard all about them all the time, but like there was a world of other prog groups like that I missed. Catching up on them now. But so I listened to that, and then really at the peak of all that, like at the end of the in like the summer of '77, I remember going to see Yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Pink Floyd, and Led Zeppelin. Like they all played at the Garden that summer, and it was the first tickets where it was like it wasn't 750 anymore. Like there were 1050 and like 1250 to go to these gigs, and you had to send away in the mail to get the tickets. And that was that, and that was the peak of all of that, or the end of it, really. And then like the punk records really started coming in. The Ramones. My brother brought in like the Ramones records, which I never really took to so much. But like when the Sex Pistols happened, then I was like all in after that because they like they had it. They had the visual going on. They had like all the attitude, and they were like they seemed very revolution. They were revolutionary to me. Like I would look at them like this is fucking great. Like they're vomited here, and they're fucking got their fingers up their noses, and like it's all these crazy stories going around about them. So like that really piqued my interest. And I swayed to that. I was listening to prog and like fusion, jazz, fusion bands up until, and really it overlapped. I never really left. I was still listening to the Beatles when punk was happening, but like it's but that when that first wave of punk happened, that was like a huge thrill when the Clash came around and the Jam, and then there was like all those bands, they all came through New York, and it was a big thrill, but it was very much larger than life, It was larger than life picture. These guys, Joe Strummer, he's like a huge, not a rock star, but he was a huge star, and he was like, my God, it was like he was that compelling, or any of those kind of bands. And then, but then when hardcore really started to emerge, or like when it was like really at a very street level, people like they weren't like great players. They weren't as good players. They weren't playing like Paul Weller or like Andy Partridge or something. They weren't like, they weren't that, it was like it was a very street level thing. And that really appealed to me. And though that scene for me, it made all things possible then. And I said, well, I can't play a guitar either. Never touched a guitar in my life, but like now I probably could. So my friend who did play the guitar when we were kids, Kid Mike Upson, he was like playing Yes songs and shit when we were kids, like in the '70s. Like he was like an actual guitar player. He showed me two bar chords, and I wrote a couple Bedlam songs like 2 weeks later. That's all it took. That was my introduction to the arts. And then after that, it's like, yeah, everything like really like took off from there. Really, there was other stuff supporting it, like we can get into that, like money wise. But yeah, that was it. That really was like the go sign, the green light that you could like, you could get into whatever you want to get into. I mean, I could have been a painter if I tried, you know what I mean? But that was like a little too ambitious for me. But a filmmaker, a punk musician for a bunch of years or whatever, that was a perfect form of expression really for me. And I took to it when I was into it. I was really into it. I lived it. I lived it up. I lived it. I was eating and sleeping it. And then and then there I was, and then I got into Bio Records and really into the film scene, and here I am, 63 years old. But everything's cool, like everything's good. I said, I feel like the hardcore scene, Jersey and New York, really, a lot of it played out in New York, but like, I went to all the Jersey stuff. I played in New Jersey, and it was a huge foundation for me to do whatever I wanted to do on. I built my whole life on it, really. You can look at my life and go, well, that may not be that much of a life, but it's like, it's like I'll take it. You know what I mean? I'm, so far so good as far as I'm concerned.
Was
Yeah.
Black Sambo your first band?
Well, yeah, not quite really. I was like with Bedlam before they were even called Bedlam. Like we didn't really come up with a name yet. I think where there was competing names, I thought up the Nuns Castrating Priest, and Rhino had AS ASS America's Six Society, and the other one we thought up was ATI, and that was any three initials.
That's great.
Really cutesy. I'm surprised no one's used it since, so not that I know of anyway. But none of them stuck, and that was when Lenny was the singer. Rhino was playing the bass, and he was this big funny Gibson bass, and I played a guitar, and Scott was on the drums. And then I ducked out of there to be in Black Sambo with my girlfriend, and Jim came in, and Lenny became their manager, I think. And I think then they got Frank Greco to play the bass, and Steve moved over to the guitar. And that was the lineup. And then Tommy came in, and then Scott left, and then Lenny became the drummer. I mean, that's how it all went, really. And it started in my mother's basement too. That band we all started rehearsing there.
Well, tell me a bit about Black Sambo, because I know the name as a band sort of connected to that time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How active was the group at that
Well,
point?
those bands like both, My Three Sons, Black Sambo, Beef Jerky, they probably played. Black Sambo might have played 8 or 10 gigs, maybe their whole thing. I mean, we definitely recorded something. We recorded like a demo tape, probably in Hillside. There was a studio in Hillside we went to, I think we did that anyway, unless there's maybe a live recording. I don't know, but we played at CBGB's, we played at A7, we played at the show place. Um, we might have, no, I don't think we played at the Court Tavern. We really only did a handful of gigs. My three sons, they probably, well, we're talking about Black Sabbath. Yeah, so that was when I was hanging out. Well, this is another part of this story. When all this stuff started, like when I left, I had like a bunch of tragedies in my life, like in 1980. Not tragedies, but like upheavals where I was questioning like what the hell to do with myself. And through some strange influence of some of the people around me, I joined the Navy. So I went into the Navy in the end of 1980. Kind of like in that moment, I was at, yeah, and I went AWOL later then to see, well, I went AWOL initially, but then I went AWOL a second time when I came back to New York on leave, and the Clash was playing at Bonds like that spring.
Hmm.
And I went to see him once while I was like on leave, but then I was like, fuck, they're playing for like the next 2 weeks or something. So I went to like a whole bunch of those gigs. Then I went and turned myself. I went back to the West Coast, and all this other stuff happened. But like I was like, so I went AWOL then later. After I got back, I was on restriction. Then I went AWOL again. I got on a Greyhound in Seattle. I rolled back to New York, and was that like October '81, say maybe October 1981, and that's then so the hardcore scene was like happening now already. It was a really tiny thing though still, and that's when I got into that, and I went to and I met Diva Hasi, who's like one of my movie stars from early on, and I met her, and she really like changed. She changed my whole world really in many ways, and I was a young person, and it was like she opened the doors to that, and then hardcore, like like well, I was all happening at one time, but it was like a new world for me, and it really.
Diva, I wanted to dive into Diva. And we'll talk about the movies in a bit, but one of the most captivating things, clearly, from one of your earlier films, The Orbitrons, which we'll get into in a bit, certainly is Diva,
Oh yeah, she's almost carrying it on her back. And she's certainly the best looking one of the thing, but like the two cops, like they might be like maybe upstaging her this much.
a
But
little bit.
they're trying a lot harder than her though. She was like more method than they were. They were
And
doing.
I'm not familiar with who she was at that time. Was she a person in the scene, clearly, or
The person in the scene. I met her at A7, her and her girlfriend, and I started dating her girlfriend initially. And I remember hanging out. Like, they were staying at the Chelsea Hotel. I remember up there, like hanging with her, and like hanging with all nice crowd of people, like at the Chelsea. And she was a young person. She was I guess 18 maybe when I met her, and I was pushing 21, say. So that's it was like it was just like that moment, and I met her, and we fell in together at some point. Some point, the girl I was dating, what she she was AWOL from the Navy, as a matter of fact, but she was pregnant from some sailor, and now she's starting to show. So she went back to the Navy to have her child, and she get her discharge. Like they take care of her. They're gonna, she go and do that, go back and take care of everything at once, have the baby, get the discharge, and go home and do what she's got to do. But when she left town, then Diva either called me. I think Diva got in touch with me, and I went and met her, and we went on our first date at the Port Authority. We went to the Arby's that was there. I met her at Arby's, so I was like a high roller, buying her a roast beef sandwich. But yeah, so like that started from there, and then we ended up together, and Black Sambo. We started playing that stuff, and I was playing the bass. I couldn't play very well, but Mike was a very good guitar player. He's a guy who could play like Steve Howe and Yes. And Scott was a very steady drummer. and it was like slow, dirty, shitty music, but like Diva thought the name up, like she she came up with the name for the band, and I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good, you know what I mean? And I knew who Black Sambo was, like from the children's stories, but she thought it sounded like Black Sabbath kind of bit, and the band kind of sounded like had that kind of like, what do you call it, a minor chord kind of sound. I guess I don't know what the hell. I don't know anything about the minor chords, but yeah. So there we were. We just we didn't play so much. And it was like it was a mixed reactions, and often like Tommy was saying, you're playing these gigs, and it's like you're making it. I played at the Dirt Club, or I played here. But in fact, you're sitting there, and my brother, my sister-in-law's there, my cousin. You know what I mean? It's really, you're playing in front of no one, or you're playing in front of the other bands in those days. Because it's not like we were like had some huge following or anything. We were fortunate to go play A7 was a really like a cool place to play. It was like really like an intimate joint. You know what I mean? It was tiny, and it was a great time. The My Three Sons gig was very good at that. That was like one of our more memorable shows. Was playing at A7.
So how did My Three Sons uh, come about? I know that was you and Scott Frank sort of getting that rolling.
Yeah, the main guy though was Joe Sages, and he was a guy I knew. I kind of vaguely remember him from junior high school, but he was like quieter and like he wasn't like hanging around with like the same people. But I met him really like in high school. I guess he must have been in 11th grade. I don't think how that all. Yeah, he must have been in 11th grade, and I was in 12th grade. And I just really got on with him really well, and he was just a really like an interesting, cool guy to know. In high school, he was a fun kid, and then afterwards, he was in a band all at the same time with a guy named Joe Tabito, who was friends with Paul Richard, and his friend. Well, then he became friend. He knew Paul Richard. They lived in the same neighborhood in Union, so they probably went to the grammar school together and all that. Joe Tabito. I think he lives in Hawaii now. I haven't heard from him in a long time, but he was in a band with Sages called Crib Death. I'm trying to think who was drumming for that band, but I can't think of it. But Joe Sages was like the singer and the bass player, and Tabito played the guitar. Um, but they weren't sticking together. I think they were probably having getting along with each other, or whatever was happening with them, or they played a few times. We played with them in Newark, and I remember playing with them in a Catholic church, like in the Irvington Maplewood border. I can't think of the name of the church anymore. It was like Father somebody, like set the thing up, and say just came and played there with Crib Death, and but they never got going really. And then we started talking to, we started hanging with Sages then more, and we just formed a band. Like I think he the way he tells it, it's like me and Scott asked him, "Oh, Joe, do you want to like start a band and like we'll be like the rhythm section?" I don't remember that. It could be true though, because I don't remember so much really. But yeah, that's how that got rolling. And we started playing together, and we just got on really well. That was like another time, like before Bio Records, where we were like, it was like this great thing where you're hanging with your bandmates, and it was like a small little gang, like they describe it. It was like four of us against the world, or three of us at that time, and we started playing it. And I didn't remember the name of the studio, but Tommy mentioned it. I think SCS it was in Bergen County or somewhere up in up north to me, up the Parkway, and that was a great. But we used to rehearse there all the time. And Bruce Wingate came down there and played with my Three Sons once, which was really cool. We think we found him in front of a liquor store hanging around without a car, you know what I mean? So we took him for a ride, and he played with us. But a beautiful memory of that place is that the guy who owned it was Spider. The guy's name was Spider, and we used to, and he was a really cool guy, no nonsense guy, but he was a really nice guy, and it was cheap. I don't know what we paid to rehearse there. It was like next to nothing. But there was a sign hanging in the studio, and it said, "You poke holes in my ceiling, I'll poke holes in your head." And we just thought that was the greatest. That's my memory of Spider and SCS. It was like we didn't poke holes in the ceiling.
Hmm.
And that was happy. It was just like a happy bonding thing, you know. We could, you know, like I said, once again, Scott could play. I was bashing the shit out of this guitar. I had this like kind of bastardized Frankenstein Jaguar. It was like a Fender Jaguar from way back when, but it had like a whammy bar on it, but it wasn't the same neck, and it was like different pickups, but it was like a really like a real noisemaker guitar. You can really beat it up and like get a lot of feedback out of it. It had this big Music Man amp. That was just a fantastic thing. It was like a really, really nice amplifier. You could do lots of noise with it. And so I took advantage of that. I wasn't really able to don't really know how to play, but I could play enough to do what I was doing. And Joe, he was like a really good song. I thought he was a very good songwriter, and his songwriting. I think he's, you know, I haven't talked to him in a little while now. I tried calling him like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times in the last year and a half, and I'm not getting an answer. So I don't even know what's happening to him. But I haven't heard anything bad. I know he's had health problems in recent times, but he could write songs, and he's, like I said, the last I saw him, he was still writing songs. He was playing with the people from Children in Adult Jails, Diane and Sue Braun, for a while. I remember that, and other people. So he was a good songwriter, and he can, you know, he could come up with it. He could sing too. He could sing and play an instrument at the same time, which I was would have been impossible for me. And so yeah, so we went with Sages. He was just he was a cool, he was the band leader really, and we played a bunch of gigs with them. When I got, yeah, we played a bunch of gigs. I think the first gig we played was at Patrick's in New Brunswick. I think we might have played 2 gigs down there, and we used to get paired up with Cyanamid all the time.
Hmm.
There were a bunch of noise or whatever too. Although they were a lot slicker than we were. They were a lot, you know, they were like a tighter band. We were like a really a loose sounding thing. Um, but I'm happy we recorded. We recorded a demo tape in Hillside that we mastered it and cleaned up the sound some time ago. I think in 2006, but I never really did anything with it. But should find a home, but there was like those recordings, and then we recorded at the Sanctuary in Caldwell, West Caldwell, in one of these places up that way. There was a studio there for years, and in fact, we went back to that studio to clean up the old tapes. We had to bake, in fact, that we had the master tape, and we had to bake it. They baked it at like 120 degrees, like overnight or something, and you would get one play out of it, and it worked. And there you go. That's the only like the My Three Sons that we have is that stuff. And
Well, there was a single as well,
yeah,
correct?
the single was really shitty though. It was like it was poorly recorded and poorly mixed, and we recorded that, and we had our ears blown out, and we mixed it on the spot, and your ears are blown out. We were playing it for real volume, you know, we had amps up to 11, and like, you know, it was like this big screaming feedback mess. And it's the record just came out sounding like hell, but there's not proper guidance on it. It would have helped to have somebody with a little knowledge of what was going on. I don't think like the engineer who was there, I don't think he cared at all what the hell it sounded like, or he couldn't, you know, he probably couldn't hear at that point either. So, but yeah,
Well,
the single had nice artwork on it by a kid that we went to high school with too, Brian Grady. Should mention him. He painted the cover of it. Or he, you know, he did like an ink drawing of the cover of it. So it's nice.
now the single was released on Buy Our Records.
Yes, it was. It was.
Yeah. So was that kind of your, were you hands-on at the label at that point, or was that kind of your,
No, no, we were just using the name at that point, really. The label, I don't think they really sat down and started being a label. Maybe, yeah, you know, somewhere around there, but like, yeah, it was really just a name. There was no office or anything. That was probably being run out of Jim's basement at that point.
Hmm.
83, 84. But I think we recorded that in 83. So I got that time. And then I think when they started, when we had the office on Springfield Avenue in Irvington, I think that must have been 85, 86, by 85, we started that had happened. And then we were like a real label. Now you walked in and it was shelves full of records, and it was all of that then. But the My Three Son thing was kind of just like a tossed off record that was hanging around, never sold. And I think, in fact, I think Say just melted him. He left him in the trunk of the of his car for like a couple of summers, and then when he looked at them again, they were a puddle. And so there's not that many of them around. They're around. My brother works in a record store now, the Jacks in Red Bank,
Hmm.
and he occasionally sees a My Three Sons record. It's like fetching big money, like $15 and $20, and I'm like, geez, man, and where's my cut for that? But yeah, it's a funny thing. It's just it's rarity. It's definitely not the sound of the thing. We did better on the New Jersey Got It, the New Jersey's Got It comp.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, that we really have to work on.
Yeah, that's a classic New Jersey compilation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a good record. Yeah, real happy. I'm happy that that's really what's left. I'm glad that the Starving Artist had melted, and like those 45s, there's not that many of them around, but New Jersey's Got It. But we were really happy. We were happy with that we managed it this time. It was a relief. It's like, oh Christ, we
Mm.
took a moment. We sat back and took a moment to like clean, come back next week and mix it.
Now, that band, My Three Sons, that went on until about 85, right? That was kind of when.
I think what happened there, the way I remember it, is before I like when I okay, so by 1984 is when I got arrested and I got taken back to San Diego to the Navy.
Mm.
I got arrested in a bookstore, the Book Review in Union Center, reading a copy of Fahrenheit 451 in the aisle. The police came up the aisles and they're like, "Mr. Frieri?" I said, "No, that's my father." They said, "Well, you're under arrest. You look a lot like the Mr. Frieri we're looking for." But a detective had seen me that arrested me when I was a kid. He saw me going into the bookstore, and he explained it to me afterwards. He said they were just getting computers at that time, the police, 1984. And he said he's looking at the computer and he saw that you had an AP. When you go AWOL, they put an APB for you out in all 50 states. They don't send anybody looking for you, and they don't send the police to you anywhere. You know what I mean? They don't actively look for you. But if you do something, or if you get, whatever happened, you get pulled over driving your car or whatever, and they could run your information. And that's how they get you. It's no hurry. So I was the detective told me, oh, I saw that you were AWOL from the Navy. I saw it on the computer. I said, I see this guy around, not infrequently. I was hanging around like nothing was happening. And sure enough, he arrested me, and I guess I went back to the Navy. So yeah, yeah, I'm prattling on about the Navy, but it's part of the story. But I went back to yes, I went back. But I think before we were leaving, though, at that point we were getting into 60s punk music. We'd gotten like the first early Pebbles records and that, and like the records that were on Moxie Records. They were like really these terrible sounding records. But they had like the real feel to them. They had that real beautiful 60s childhood feel, taking me back to like the Monkees, but like a ugly garage version of it all, not slick. And so we were listening to that. When I came back, we were like losing the side that wanted to do like My Three Sons. So we kind of just turned into morphed into a band, Beef Jerky and his One Way Trip. Joe Tabito came then and joined us on like the second guitar, and also too with My Three Sons, we pretty early on we got a guy in there. There was four of us mostly. We did a few gigs like it's three of us. But then we were four piece. We got a really good guitar player and an old friend of ours we went to school with, Rob Anderson, who I'm still in touch with, and he was like a really good. He was like a real natural musician, which is something I never even no one would accuse me of being a natural musician. It was very hard to watch, playing every note that I'm playing, and pray. But he was like a really natural musician, and he was like a big he was like he helped the group out a lot having him with us. And then we got into, and I came back from the Navy, which was after Labor Day. It was like end of September. I came back here. That's when I got reacquainted with those guys. We missed a few gigs. There was a few canceled gigs along the way. We were supposed to play it. There was like an art thing, like an arts center in Rawway. We had a gig there, and we had a gig somewhere else, like up in Passaic County, someplace. I can't remember, but then we had to skip those. And when I came back, we just started playing. I think we started playing like Stepping Stone and this and that, and then we just changed our whole persona and just we rehearsed a bunch of songs like that, Wild Thing, and a couple Ventures songs we did. We did a song ESP, which is a great rock song. There's definitely film of that on YouTube. A couple of songs on YouTube of Beef Jerky, and there is. I should have sent you there's a My Three Sons. It was the My Three Sons promotional film that I'd shot way back when, but I
Oh,
never
I've
finished.
seen it. I've seen
Oh,
it.
you saw it then. Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. You're way ahead of me. Yeah, so that's all there is of My Three Sons. We pass around like a deer head. If that, I'm not giving away the story. I don't want to give away the plot. But yeah, there it was. But then, so we started doing that, and we played like, it was a different reaction. Now you're getting people are dancing to this stuff, and it's like, happy music. And but it was fun to play. And we played a bunch of times at the Dirt Club, and we played at the Jetty on Bloomfield. It was like, I think it was on Bloomfield Avenue, and well, we played here and there. Not that many. It's like, once again, it's not that many gigs. And then we finished up. At some point, Scott joined the Navy too. I implored him, don't join the Navy. He went AWOL at some point. In fact, most of the guys I knew going, they all got bad discharges, and a couple of them did okay, but like, yeah, a lot of them got bad discharges, or kicked out for whatever reason, or general discharge. And Scott joined the Navy then. So for our last gig, we played at the Slime Fest down there, like the truck yard down there, like right by like where like over the NJ Pack Center is now. That was like just an industrial zone, and John Dirt had like, there was trucks parked there, and he had the one flatbed that was the stage. And at some point he would get up. They raised him up on him and Larry Slime. They get up on this like on a pallet, and they get raised above the Passaic River. And then John jumped off the pallet into the Passaic River. It was like a protest about the pollution and the all the radon and
Oh yeah.
Agent Orange and everything, like that they're still trying to clean up down there. But it was it was that, and that was a really fun gig too. That was like a really good time. My mother was there. It was like a real, like a happy event. Um, that was May of '85, and then that was it. That was the last we played. Scott was gone. We had Tobito's sister Joanne on drums. She was like more of like a real serious rock drummer. And so that didn't last. It was like a one-off thing with her, and then we never played again. And after that, Joe Say just got married, and then he went off into a completely different direction. And I didn't see him for quite a few years.
Well, it's cool that you mentioned the Jetty because it actually hasn't come up yet in it on this channel.
That was a legit venue. That place.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bands played there.
The only reference I have of the Jetty comes from an interview that Danzig gave to Tim Summer, Noise the Show, back in like '84. And he's talking about seeing Alien Sex Fiend at the Jetty. And I'm
Yeah,
like, that was
those
the
bands
Jetty.
played there. Yeah. I remember seeing the Gun Club down there.
Hmm.
A bunch but like they were more like out of town bands. It was like touring bands who played the Jetty. So yeah, it was like, but it's like, once again, it's like going to the Blue Note or something. Yeah, you're gonna go see Dizzy Gillespie or something, but it's like a seafood restaurant though. You go there and people are eating fish, you know what I mean? Eating dinner, and it's like and it's just like the Jetty. I think the tables were set up and people were still eating, or maybe they were just drinking. I don't remember how it actually was worked out for like band nights, but the place was, it was a seafood restaurant. And I remember it had the motif of the pirate, the pirate face on the wall, like life preservers and like all like the ropes hanging around.
Wow.
It was a funny, it was a funny place. It was a nice place. The guy's name was Perry, and I remember Perry. We were all like in awe of his girlfriend. I barely remember Perry, but I remember Perry had like a really pretty girlfriend. We were all gawking at and coveting in our hearts all the time. I don't know how else to put it. Yeah, Perry's girlfriend, but Perry was the guy who booked the place, and it
Hmm.
was right around the corner from John Dirt.
Hmm. Now, with Buy Our Records, I know The AOD guys obviously started it. They kind of passed the baton to
Yeah, yeah.
yourself and Len.
That was their name. They thought the name up.
Yeah. But for all intents and purposes, when Buy Our Records was a functioning label that went out and put out other bands' records, it was yourself, Lenny, who of course has been on the channel, and Jim from Bedlam. It was kind of the three of you day to day.
It was really those two at first when it really started. And when I came back from the Navy, like in the aftermath of that, I felt left out and wanted to get involved. So they took me in, but that's another story. That was, for whatever it's worth, I'll tell you, like Buy Our Records was like, if me and Jim, we were cannabis pioneers. I like to refer to it as. We were cannabis pioneers, and that's what fueled that whole label. And that's what really, like, the millions of dollars we sunk into it. It was all like illegal funds, so to speak, without going into the detail. But yeah, so that's how what made that. So like, and we were young, and we thought our lives would just go on forever, making tons of money, like Watts at 20s and all that stuff, like all of, and it really kind of did in a way, but like that was like the real heyday of it. It was like the 80s, the 90s, really, but the 80s, yeah, we were working like crazy in those days,
Well,
risking incarceration.
with the three of you guys, how I mean, were there set roles within the label, or was it just kind of
We
figuring it
did
out?
get to that at some point. It was like improvised, really, but it was there was like set names. I think I was artist and repertoire. And I always remember the first card we got. We gave it to a friend of ours, like he ran a print shop, and we told him like, okay, this is Chris Frieri, and it's artist and repertoire. And the card came back, and it was like Chris Frieri, artist and repertoire, or something really like they misspelled the name, so we had to have them reprinted. That's what I remember about what was going on. Everybody, I guess we're the guy at the print shop was probably smoking a lot of weed too. So yeah, so I was artist repertoire, and I can't remember what Lenny's title was, but he really like he did like the real office work and like receipts and all that kind of stuff, the sales stuff, like the keeping track of all of that. What we have the image. I think he did that, and I remember Jim. We always referred to him as shipping and packing. He did all like the shipping stuff, like in the back. He had a desk back there, and then Jim, he was the guy without a chair. He always had a table he sat on. So I remember that too. These little details, that make the whole story into something maybe worth listening to. I don't know, but yeah. So it was a really fun time down there. It was like yeah, there was like personalities involved in it, and all this stuff that like the soap opera crap that goes on, and musicians, they're not like all like 100% like empaths. You know what I mean? Like some of them are quite horrible, really, and like this, like it's all of that, all stuff like I normally wouldn't expose myself to. I find in my when I think back to all this stuff, and really at the time, I would rather be like a little. It's like when you get into the middle of something, it's like high school, or it's like the Navy, or it's like a lot of other things, the movie business. When you really start seeing it close up, the shine goes off. And it
Hmm.
gets like kind of like, oh God, this is really what it is. I'm thinking it's like something else, like I'm going to be dancing around like Gene Kelly, or whatever I'm going to say, but it's not that at all. That's just the product part of it, but like the stuff that all that. So it was all of that at Fire Records, which I didn't care for that much, but the pursuit of it was fun. I remember being involved in it. It was like it was a nice time. We did a lot of things. We used to go to the CMJ conventions. We'd all roll into like the Marriott and like be sleeping, spend the weekend there, whatever. However they did these things, the weekdays, I don't remember, but we were going to a few of those. So you met a lot of people, and you saw a lot of like a lot of characters there, and it was fun. It was like a fun, just you're young, but that's really when I think of any of this stuff. It's like I remember being young and like not knowing a goddamn thing about anything, and like and that you know, that
And
adds a little spice to life. Yeah, so it was a nice time.
that's when you do those things when you're too young not to know any better. That's
Yeah,
the important stuff.
yeah. Well, it just felt, yeah, it felt like we were really like living. mean, I still feel relatively, like I'm living it up still in a way, but like, you can't, it's like a different, it's just a different thing. So I don't like to, I look back and say, oh Christ, all the stuff that happened in the 80s and all the fucking heartaches and, headaches and all kinds of problems. But that really softens over time. And it doesn't, I only look back at it now and go like, it's only like the happiness of it all,
Mm.
celebratory nature of it all was like really what sticks. So it's like it was a good time, and Buy Our Records was a very good time. And I think what else to tell you about? I tell you another half. Well, then well about that though, Aaron eventually came along, and this is a guy we knew. Jim went back with him a little 2 years further than I did, but he grew up in Irvington, but then he moved into right on the edge of Union. So he started going to school with us, like at junior high school time. He was going to St. Paul's, I think, before that, Catholic school. And so he came over to public school, and he was just a really cool guy. He was very smart, and he was just really, he had like a really good personality. He was funny, and I met him, and he was like the hippie. We met him, and I met him at first. I was sitting by the brook, on a piece of cement, and he came walking around the corner in overalls with no shirt under it, the red bandana with him, and like he was 15, he already had like a full beard and like a big bushy like Frank Zappa kind of hairdo going on already, and he was a really like a fun guy to be around. I never had a bad moment with the guy, really. Even he went through a life of drug abuse and everything else, but he never crossed me and I never crossed him, and we always had a really nice relationship. So, but he had experience in business. He worked at, you remember a store called Drucker's down in Newark? It was an audio store. Like they sold, like it was like pre-Crazy Eddie, Drucker's. It was like a store in Newark, and then they opened up a store up in like Morris County, someplace eventually. But all through the 70s, they were down there, Arnold Drucker. But he worked there, so he knew a bit about business and a bit about sales. And he came on board to try to help us. And he did help. He helped organize this, and he was fun to hang around with. And so we, spent a lot of time together there, and that was a nice part of that. But he couldn't save us though from ourselves, and like just from the business itself. It was like it was. I remember it was always thing. It was like limited shelf space. We can't like fit. You can only fit X amount of records in a record store.
Mm.
So all of that kind of like a mentality about it, and it was but was part of the course. We had our thing together. It was cool. I was at about Aaron though. One day, like me, Jim, and Aaron were sitting there one afternoon, and we had a bunch of mushrooms. And Aaron brought this big, he called it the chalice. He brought the chalice down there. We boiled up some tea and water, and we all drank this mushroom tea together. And everybody started tripping like crazy. And Aaron and Jim, they left. They left me there. So I hung around answering the phone like when it rang, and hanging around being all tripped up and Buy Our Records. And that was a fun time too. All by my lonesome. Yeah. It was all of that. That was like that was the appeal of it all, because it was just an extension of the party for
Right.
me. I took it seriously, but never too seriously.
What are some of your favorite releases that the label did during
Well,
that?
the ones close to me were like the early ones really. The Bedlam records, of course. You know what I mean? Like the first Bedlam record, it was better than the second one. Tommy called it like an EP, the second record. But yeah, New Jersey's Got It, of course, and then like afterwards, like the PMS record, I was tight with them, and I still see Carmen and Gina on, like Carmen more online, and Carla, who was like a later member of the band. I don't think she played on that PMS record, but when they did that record though, like the original band was like two of the members were already gone, and then by the time it came out, the singer was gone. So like they had to reform. So it was like it was never the same magic really. Like they were still a good band. Like they were cool. They were a cool group through the different singers and different bass players and different guitar players that they had. But the original band was really like the real thing. Like the original groups, like usually that's usually how it is. Um, so PMS, yeah, that was a record that those girls, I think they stayed at my house the night before because they lived like way out in Brooklyn, and they stayed at my I had an apartment in Elizabeth at that point. They recorded somewhere in New Jersey, like not maybe not quite at Trenton, but like yeah, New Brunswick area. Maybe they knew a studio down there. So that record was close to me. And then Ass Master was a record
Hmm.
like
Raging Slab.
got some stick, but I was friendly with those guys. Were really nice. And then, of course, sad that Elise passed away a bunch of years ago. Um, and I
Yeah,
talked to her kind of right up to the end. Um, yeah, it's
Raging Slab is one of those, classic tales of a band that should have been massive.
yeah, they should have been like they should have had yeah something happened at RCA or somewhere. But I remember they opened up for Motley Crue a bunch of times. They opened up for Lenny Kravitz at Radio City. So they were like doing all of that stuff. Like, and at some point, I don't know what happened, but that ended at some point. I think they might have even made a record with Rick Rubin.
I believe so. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, but I said I don't remember it though. I don't really remember the stuff after. I remember like the first record that they did. I can't remember that they're standing in front of a truck on the cover. I can't remember the name of the record even at this point. But Don't Dog Me and that those songs.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember that a little bit, and I still saw them up into the '90s. But I don't really know. I don't really know the whole story of what actually happened to their career. But they were really like really popular in New York, and they had a following for sure. They drew, like they were a draw. You know, tough. It's a tough business. I don't know the details, but
Yeah. But
I
having
think a
said
lot of
all
them would
that, having said all that, they did put out a fairly large amount of material.
had a career. Yeah, they had a career. It just could have been a bigger career, a better career for them. But and I think once Elise was gone, they're not going to do Raging Slab ever again.
Mm,
Because at some point, Alex told he told me like at some point like she became like the draw. Like they'd be playing at. Remember him telling me they were playing at like stoner festivals, like playing at big festivals, but it was like the on the pothead stage or whatever. And
right.
she said, yeah, Lisa, and she was kind of the in a way a focal point for obvious reasons. She's the woman in the band. So
Well, I mean, I obviously the AOD stuff is the AOD stuff. I mean,
oh
that's
yeah, that and I'll tell you this. I would say this AOD. What we should have done, the record label was much wiser. Instead of putting out all these records, and you may like them to different degrees, if we could have put out some records, but we should have given our money to AOD to go do a proper tour and like support their records, get their records advertised, and get them into like but we didn't. I don't know if we quite had the connections to that, and we didn't have really the idea at that time to like we're going to put out this and put out that and put out every other thing. But I think like AOD, because AOD sold the most, and they were like the steadiest, and they were local. Really most of the sales we did were all AOD records or AOD tapes. And where they
mm,
pressed the cassette, they did the cassette, but with the pink, and where people called the pink record and the yellow record. But the pink record, then they had it green, which I thought was like a really cool idea in a way at the time. And then, but Christ, everybody thinks of it as the pink record. So they're going to look and see, there's this green record. But I liked it in green. I thought it was like a nice touch on their part. The green cassette. It might have been a pink one too, but they sold. We could sell their records. People knew them. The other bands, they were really local bands. X-Men and
mm.
Electric Love Muffin and that. They were like one was I guess a Philly band. The other band was from South Jersey. Um, but and all of it. But like AOD, like they had like a real like people knew the name. So
Yeah, I think for me, Ass Master and Pussy Galore are the two records, besides AOD and the first Bedlam record. Those are the ones that I kind of still dive into today from Bio Records.
yeah, I don't listen to any of that stuff at all, really. Much of it, Well, I'll tell you one other funny little detail of the hardcore life was that what I'm really amazed about is all these records I bought for $2 and $3. I've sold some of them on Discogs for $1,200, for $1,000, for $800, for $400. All like the Discord stuff and you name it, like the New York hardcore stuff, like even the second tier type of bands, like they're just rare records. The Heart Attack record, I had a Heart Attack record, paid $3 for it, I guess, at the time.
I just sold, I have a buddy who had a copy of Three Hits from Hell, which he got off of jury only like in 1981. Like, and the vinyl looks like it came off the assembly line still.
Yeah,
Pristine.
oh yeah, because you didn't play them.
Yeah. And the cover, unfortunately, was all wonky and banged up. Even with the cover being a nightmare, I still unloaded that for $650, you know. And
Yeah,
it was a bargain for that amount.
yeah, and I sold them. I probably undersold myself with a lot of this stuff, but they yeah, but for me, like the records I remember, because like hardcore to me it was an experience to go see it, like being there for it was one thing, but I didn't really like listen to it at home so much. But I do remember getting all those records and making cassettes out of them, and it used to be a funny thing because like now, like a cassette would 90-minute cassette would be 15 songs or so on one of the 15 songs. But then when hardcore came around, suddenly it was like 140 songs, like like between the two sides, and you couldn't write small enough to write all this stuff in. But I remember making tapes of these things, so like they really only got played once or twice, or some of them if I liked it a little more, like the Bad Brains 45. I listened to that a little bit, but it didn't take a beating. So yeah, they were all in clean shape, and yeah, like people collect them as it turns out.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my
Um,
that's my payoff, for buyer records.
well, when Bio Records, finally ground to a halt and it was done, at that point, were you satisfied that the label had gone as far as it could have gone?
By then I had moved to New York, and it really like I was just on to like a whole different life, or on the same life, like different. I was like this, like it was all right leaving it behind. I feel like I did everything I could. We all did, we did everything I could. I don't think it was like a failed project. It was just time for for that, and really I guess Jim probably like pulled the plug on it more than I would have, but like I think Jim had probably a few more dollars invested in that company than I did, you know. So I had quite a bit in it, but like so I think he probably pulled the plug eventually. And the last record, the Lucky Seven record, was a really good record. Those were like the best musicians really we worked with.
Hmm.
That guy, I think Kenny, he was with Willie DeVille
Hmm.
for a lot of years, and he was with and then in the '90s or 2000s he was in that group Cracker.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't really know, but they were like a big popular
Sure,
band playing
sure.
festivals and all that. And Lucky Seven, and I saw him in some other groups too through the years. But Barry Ryan was in the Rockettes and the Victims. He was in that Max's band, the Victims.
Sure, sure.
Uh, and Joe Geary, the drummer, was in a band called the Wyos, who I think were a Jersey band. Well, I remember seeing them a few times at the Dirt Club, the Wyos. They were good. They were like one of these like new rockabilly groups at the time. They were cool. They were, and but so yeah, that thing, we couldn't, I guess we sold some of them. Probably got reviewed and spinned and this kind of stuff, and we couldn't really help those guys. They carried on, and they're still that, and Lucky Seven still are reunite with Boris and Barry and Kenny. They still reunite. They played a couple of weeks ago down here on Second Street in Berlin. The name of the place is Berlin now.
Hmm.
So they're still working musicians, those guys. And it's sadly, the thing that is sad about it for me is we had a soundtrack record. I still have it, a DAT copy of it. It's mastered at Frankfurt Wayne. It's a really nice sounding record. And it was just the Orbitron soundtrack. And that was going to be the next release after Lucky Seven, but it just never happened. So I'm still looking to do something with that at some point.
You really should. I'm glad you mentioned that because
Got good bands on it. They're like
yeah,
bands of the moment.
yeah, and I we'll let's go there. Let's dive into that because um towards the latter years of By Our Records, you were getting involved in filmmaking.
Yeah, I was making Orbitrons when I was still at Fire Records. So
Right. And the Orbitrons, I love that movie. I'm so glad you turned me on to it.
I
That was
like it never felt like it. Some people want to look at it and say, "Well, it just sucks. The production value, it's a bunch of shit." Suck. But for whatever it's worth, whenever it's played, and it hasn't played that many times, it's played around a bit over the years, but it never fails me to this day. Like if it plays, the audience likes it.
Hmm.
Nobody's heckling me; they're all clapping at the end of it.
Well, starting with the soundtrack part of it first, one thing that I loved is exactly that. It's bands of that time or artists of that time. Lucy Brown,
Lucy
I
Brown.
love Azalea Snail. I mean,
Yeah,
these are names I
Naked
haven't heard
Sun
in
is like
ages.
a band called Naked Sun, who were like a popular band down here.
Right,
Like
right.
trying to think, and the other group is called I Love You.
Yeah.
They do a version of White Room,
Mm,
nice version of it.
yeah. I
It's nice
remember
when
these names around back then.
yeah, I Love You. Yeah, they were like a California group, and I know who I got all of those bands from. This is an associate of Fire Records. He was like a band manager. I think he was like Raging Slab's manager for a minute back then. It was a guy named Ed Puglisi.
Oh, yep. I know Ed.
At least you know him. And he was, yeah, he hung around the pipeline and all that stuff. And he was the guy who was friends with all these bands. So he like gathered those groups together and really helped with that soundtrack. And Raging Slab are on there doing Earache My Eye, which is a really it's good. It's good. And there's dialogue and there's incidental music and there's it's a really nice soundtrack. I wish it would have came out at the time, but like it wouldn't have helped me. Could help me more now if anybody was to hear it, because now that the films are in good order now,
Mm.
these films like I look at the original prints of this stuff and the original versions of them that were on VHS, and they're a complete mess. And now I have like I did my own like a whole my there's a machine now you can transfer your 8 millimeter film in your home like, and it does a thousand times better job than 20 years ago. I went to professional studios to have this stuff transferred 20 years. There used to be this thing called the Rank Centel. It was like this big giant like fixture. There was only one of them in New York, and they would pass it from studio to studio. Somebody's here with a Super 8 movie. It's like you can send the Rank Centel over. And it was this big device, and like you transfer film, but the new technology, the way it is now, it's like it's really clean looking. And I'm lucky that I shot a lot of this stuff in black and white, because the Hearst movie, the color was like I shot it in color, and the color was like not Kodachrome and that. It's not a stable format that I was working in, and it bled all over the place. Like the Hearst movie, when I transferred that, when I got this machine, it's a mess. It's all yellow. You see, like it's all turned yellow to different degrees. But I think I was talking to Jim about it the other day because he asked about it. And I said, I think I may do when I get a moment. I'm going to try cutting a yellow version of it and just make it like an arty thing, like so everybody's skin is like yellow and varying degrees in different scenes. But the thing is about it's yellow, but it's a lot sharper than the C. The only thing I have now is the DVD version, and it's really compressed and horrible. It's like from the early 2000s, and I just think it looks like hell. So that's that. So we're talking. What are we talking about? I'm like talking too much.
Well, I mean, with the Orbitrons, my challenge is how do I describe this film to someone watching this video who's unfamiliar with it? I'm going to give it a try. You may or may not agree, but off the top of my head, it's Eraserhead meets Night of the Living Dead meets Caligula. How's that?
Hey, I'll take that. I like that. I like all those movies.
Cool.
I like David Lynch.
Yeah, there's definitely a Lynch vibe in quite
It's a
work.
funny thing. And it's funny that you say there's a Lynch vibe in the Overtron. So at some point, Lenny's playing a ghoul at some point, and he's walking around and he's got like a Frank Booth kind of leather jacket on, and he's got like the mask over his face. He's like sucking up the poppers or whatever he's sucking on. So yeah, there's that. But like, yeah, it's the Orbitrons. But that was in these films, and it took really like 2 years to shoot these things, like the Mummy, the Orbitron, or they went on for a long time to like you start to finish. It was like and those films were cut by hand too, and it's amazing cleaning them up now. There's like you can see the splices with like I'm like, where the hell did my hair go? I'm thinking, where'd my hair go? And it's like, oh, well, here it is. It's like in the splices of Teenage Mummy. It's all like yeah, it's like it's filled with cat hair and my hair, and like it's like and every kind of like stain, and it was like a complete it's like a messy, it was like a messy process making those films. Cutting Super 8 by hand, it's like my eyes went bad after that.
I was a teenage mummy, the first one?
No, I did the first one I did was Deflator Moss, and that was in '83, and that's really what I think of as my best film. It's like the really honest, straightforward. Really, I was the most myself in it. I think not even that I'm in it, but like just make the whole thing. It's like all I was all in. And I was a young. I had no idea what I was doing really. I never had handled a camera in my life. Luckily, somebody else handled the camera on that one. But yeah, but that was the first one in '83. There was one before it too called Cemetery Meat Crimes, which is really like you can't really cut it. I used little bits of it in the Sweet Lorraine's diary at the end in the last chapter of that. Cemetery Meat. I think there's a thing where I cut Lenny's dick off with and feed it to a dog, and it's funny. It's like very much like Caligula, and yeah. So that was the early one, but that's not really a movie. But the Fledermaus is really a cool film, and that's played a few times recently. And one time it went over really. It really brought the house down.
That's great. And we
Yeah,
should mention your company is Ghost Limb Films.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and staying with the Orbitrons for a moment, you did film some of that in particular at, drum roll, the Pipeline in Newark.
Oh, the spaceships at the pipeline. You can see like the checkered floor in it. Yeah, yeah. Well, we shot. Yeah, like I said, that we set up that the interior of the spaceship, and it's like really right out of the. It was like hard just out of the hardware store. We slapped that together. It's like we had like duct work and it was a plastic, like a piece of plastic. We put like Christmas lights behind it that are flickering. It's like the computer that guided us from some other galaxy, and it was like painted on controls. And then there was like a thing that looked like a bong with like an antenna like sticking out of it, like that was like at the console that I guess Di was navigating the ship from there. It was all of that, but it was like on the floor, on the dance floor of the pipeline. We did that. I think
Oh,
over a weekend. I think there was a couple days in there, and
fantastic.
but we
Uh,
shot in every room at the pipeline at some point.
we should mention too that the sadly missed Rhino is in the
Oh,
film.
yeah. He's another guy. Aaron spoke at his wake or at his funeral service or his service that they had for Steve. Aaron came, like, when they had there's a room full of people. The priest or asked, does anybody want to like say anything? We're all like putting our heads down and mumbling, like, oh, I got up and like speak in front of this, and what the hell am I going to say here? But like Aaron, he sprung out of his chair and he gave like a 10-minute tribute to Steve. And then Aaron died 8 months later, 9 months later. But Steve, yeah, he was a beautiful guy, and him I met through Jim Dunleavy and those guys because they were neighbors. Jim and Steve, they lived like really almost across the street from each other. And the way I knew Jim was he lived across the street from my grandmother when I was a baby. So I remember Jim and his sister playing with a red wagon when I was a kid. It's like that long ago, isn't it? Like way, way back. Steve lived around the bend. I didn't know him, but they were tight since they were babies, Jim and Steve. And but Steve, I met in junior high school. He was a year ahead of me, so I met him in junior high school. And in eighth grade, we started having morning parties at my parents' house. If my parents were supposed to go to work at 7 o'clock, 7:15, like that, they'd leave, and all these guys from down at Andrew Street would come piling into my house, and we'd have a big party for half an hour, 40 minutes, smoke the place out, drinking and any drugs we get our hands on. And we charged down to the school because the junior high school was very close to us. And Steve was like, he started coming to the morning parties. But also, I would say about Steve, he was the first guy who dropped out of coming to the morning parties because he wanted to go. They went and ate instead. There was a place called Jim's Eats on Morris Avenue. Jim's Eats, and Steve, like, should I hang around and smoke and get all fucked up with these guys, or should I go like eat some more? And he chose Jim's Eats over like partying at my parents' house. But that's where I met him, and like then we were just fast friends through the years. And the fun thing I did with Steve, like, I did a lot of it. He was a really nice guy to be with. He was just never a bad moment with the guy. But we took a beautiful trip to California together, like when I was AWOL from the Navy. So in February '82, I got on a plane with him to Los Angeles. His sister was living in San Jose, somewhere like that, like up north. And so we're gonna go visit her, but we went to LA first, and we took in a bunch of gigs there. We went to the Whiskey A Go Go, saw Voodoo Church and
Hmm.
Aspiration Squad. I think we're over there, and then we went up to San Francisco, and we saw like a bunch of gigs there too. We saw Saccharine Trust with the Invisible Stripes and Salvation Army,
Wow.
and a few other things, and I can't think of it all, but like, yeah, we went like and saw a bunch of hardcore bands and punk stuff like when we were out there, and I was running around with a mohawk, and Steve had his raincoat on, and the beautiful the upshot of all of this is like when I went to the airport, I was traveling light, but I had my clothes on my back, a couple pair of underwear, a couple pair of socks, a toothbrush, and they were in a paper bag I showed up at the airport with. And I get there, and here I am, and I look, and Steve, his whole family's there with a mountain of luggage, like a giant suitcase. A giant Steve had like a big giant, like 100 cassettes in a case. He had like a lot of luggage. And who ended up carrying that luggage up and down the hills in San Francisco? You're looking at him. So I showed up with a paper bag, like ready to I'm like traveling light, but he was traveling heavy. And I remember lugging his stuff all over California. But it didn't dampen the fun, it just added to it. He was just very good company, Steve. He was like a huge loss really for everybody when he left, because he was one of those people that everybody liked. And yeah, we made fun of him sometimes, had a laugh, like everybody got it, you know what I mean? Everybody came in for that shit. But like, he was a guy everybody, like, he was a beloved person compared to some of us, like, myself and maybe Kaprowski, and these guys. But like, yeah, Steve, everybody really loved him, and yeah, it was very, very sad to lose him. We saw it coming though, and I remember Lenny went to visit him. He must have been on his, he was close to dying, and Lenny described what he saw. I saw Steve, it's this and that. And I said, Lenny, it sounds like he is dying. I think he was gone a couple weeks later, 10 days later or something, because what he described was terrible. And I had a last conversation with him too. He called me. I still have his message on my phone. It's pretty sad, really. He was planning about the future, but saying, "Oh, we'll come out. You come over to my house. My mother will cook dinner for us, and I'm making a comeback and all that." But I think he lost something like 200 pounds,
Wow.
like in his hospital stay. I think he went in there. He was like 400 odd pounds. And I think when he passed away, he was like 190 pounds. But his body couldn't take it. Everything was shutting down. And he was really, the last few years of his life were very tough too. He was, couldn't really walk anymore, and he was really limited what he could do. And it was sad to watch it. But he's a guy like who was on that road, and really since we were kids. You saw him fighting it. He didn't want to like become like too big. He didn't want to like he wanted to like change his life and like have a but it didn't happen. You know, there's really nothing you can do. It's like I'm not. You can't really preach to a person. I can't really like. It's like Aaron, but he was a junkie his whole life. I can't. I couldn't really say, well, Aaron, let me sit down and explain to you, like being a junkie is not a good thing, and like
Hmm.
your father's not here to tell you this now, so I'm gonna. You can't really do it. We're grown men. So yeah, Steve. Yeah, well, he was. Everybody loved him. He was. I was tight with him. I spoke to him. we stayed in touch on the phone quite a bit all, through the years. We talked periodically. And, we got together still periodically at the holidays and that. Lenny usually has some kind of get together that I show up for. But Steve, yeah, he's like, everybody misses him. It's sad.
Well, as you know, I've had Tommy on. Fuck
Yeah,
you, Tommy.
yeah. He's a
Uh,
good interviewer though, but he tells it like it is.
exactly. Oh, he's, do I say nice stuff about Tommy? No, fuck it. Fuck you, Tommy. But I
Yeah,
had Tommy on, I had Lenny on, and um, the Bedlam stuff was reissued,
yeah,
somewhat recently. So, anybody
the
watched this?
writing needed an editor. They should have had an editor spell checking that writing.
Mm,
That's my only complaint about it, but I'm happy to see it. And Tommy was pointing out that guy, that the cartoon character, like the illustrated character, it looks very much like Scott. Looks
yeah,
like a cartoon version of Scott Frank.
yeah. So that stuff is out there again, guys,
Yeah, they're
watching this.
popular. Oh, were you at Tommy Kaprowski's Bedlam when that happened? Didn't you say you were there?
I missed it. I knew it was happening. I couldn't get down to Jersey at
Oh,
that.
okay, you're in Massachusetts, that's right. And but did he have a didn't wasn't there a second Bedlam thing? They played in like Garfield or one of these towns.
I don't know.
From I'm not am I mistaken?
I'm,
I
well,
thought they played twice, but I know I went to Tommy Kaprowski's Bedlam was the Court Tavern one. And that
mm,
was a good time. That was like a really fun time. Steve got up and sang, and Jim, or am I? Yeah, I guess that's how it is. I don't think Frank turned up for that.
mm.
He's the Bedlam guy who didn't show up for that one. Everybody likes him too, though, so nobody holds it against him. I think Jim held it against him for a while, but he got over it. Um, but
Well, we should get into the fact that Rhino, Lenny, and Jim later went on to do the band Hearse, which is critical to your filmmaking history. You did the Hearse movie.
yeah, my career depended on that film. Yeah, well, it was a stepping stone, but like no, it was actually for those early movies, it was really one of the more coherent ones and interesting ones. And here we go. The lights went out again. But we the thing that about the Hearst movie, and if I explain it to people, if I explain it to the cast members, they'll go, "Oh yeah, I see what you're saying now." But I didn't write the script, but I kind of helped with the story. I tell you about the writer of this movie. I don't want get into that, but but it was structured like a hard day. It was not structured like a hard day's night, but it was it was a hard day's night without the good songs and the good suits and the good vibe, from like the swinging London. But it was like they start out like there's an obstacle in front of them. They meet like the space alien who like gives them bestows like magical powers onto them, and at the end of it, they play their triumphant gig where everybody goes crazy, start beating each other in the audience and breaking the furniture up and all that. And that's what it was supposed to be. And then they go off to in the hearse and they take off at the end. It's like a really it's like a nice. I think it's a good. I think it's good for for me. I think it's like it's like I said, it's a cohesive one, and I liked May. It was fun to make. They were easy. They were easy people to work with. Really, there was controversy and like there was all kinds of crap that flew around like any film set. But it was a good. They were nice to work with. They were good people, patient. You didn't need a lot of patience to make film. There's a lot of sitting around, but yeah, the Hearst movie. Yeah, they went on to do Hearst. I guess like that. That was quite a ways after Bedlam. It's probably 5, 6, 7 years later, something like that. Um, they were good. The Hearst were cool. I went to see them quite a bit. They played. I think they played New York a few times. I saw them here, but I definitely saw them at the Pipeline a bit. And
Hmm.
we had a good time. Know what the Hearst movie I remember about it? I got better lights, and I knew the camera better, and I was like I was able to do we were able to do fancier shots. We were able to move the camera around a little bit. It was a little more mobile. On the Stranger, I started getting there, But that movie, like I had like a nice help on it. But I never worked all those films. I never had more than a crew of two or maybe three sometimes. I'd
Now,
make
the
I'd
Hearst,
make the actors do work.
hmm, the
I'll
Hearst
just
movie, was that released? Is that out, the Hearst film?
it was came out on I definitely made VHS copies of it at the time. So it was out like that. I don't remember selling too many of them. I probably gave a bunch of them away, and then whatever happened to the rest of them. But and then DVD came in, so I did the DVD with the Mummy, the Orbitrons, and the Hearst movie on it. And but they look terrible. Like, at the time, I guess it was great. Look, it's on a little disc now. All these movies fit, but it fits for a reason because they squeezed the crap out of it, and it's like they just look bad.
Hmm.
The Hearst movie, out of all the old films, that's the one I wasn't really able to put back together because I shot it in color, and the color leaked all over the place. Stranger had some color stuff in it too, but it survived a little bit better for the most part. It wasn't so damaged. It was faded, but I was able to tweak around the colors and kind of bring them back up. But yeah, the Hearst movie, it's like there's not much I can do with it other than make the yellow copy of it,
Right.
or put out the compressed copy. I mean, I could send, compressed copies around. I could even put it up on. If you really want to see it, I'll put it up on Vimeo, and I'll send you the link to it. It's just like I said, you'll see the difference. But
Yeah,
Hearst movie,
that'd be cool because I remember hearing about it. It's kind of like the stuff of legend.
ah, it
You know,
holds together well. It holds together well.
it's cool.
No, it's nice in those old movies. It's in the Orbitrons, and definitely in that one, and in The Stranger. There's all these lost landscapes that are completely transformed now, like the motorcycle scenes, like the two guys on motorcycles rolling around like these long things with White Room playing and all that. That's all like old Hoboken.
Mm.
That whole neighborhood that we shot that in, that was on a Sunday. I driving around with no helmet. Nobody says anything. Police doesn't care. It was like so we shot that all on a Sunday, and nobody said two words to us. And it was like a real old-fashioned neighborhood. It was like an industrial. It was like the houses were like worker houses, like for the company. It was like it was like a company town practically. I don't know what the big industry was here. I mean, it's left. There's one big factory, and way at the edge of Hoboken by like the viaduct or whatever that thing is, the overpass that goes up to Jersey City Heights. That end of Hoboken. That factory's still there, but I went there recently, like a year ago. I took a ride over there with Dunleavy, and it's like that whole neighborhood that I shot that in. None of those streets, none of those houses, none of it's left anymore. It's all high rises, and like it's like they cleaned it all up. The old town's gone, so it's kind of nice to see that if you're interested in that, which I like that kind of thing. The changing, how the neighborhood's changing, and that I like seeing it. And then the Stranger, yeah, it's filled with that stuff. It's a lot of in the marsh, and all that. And I passed through it now. It's completely transformed. It's all fenced off and everything. And then you just walk through a hole in the fence, and you can go hang around the marsh and shoot all the trains you want. They blow the horn at you when they went by, waving, waving for the camera. The engineer. So yeah, that's my life in the movies. But yeah, I could prattle on with this stuff like for eternity. Really,
Is Diva still around?
I haven't seen her in a lot of years because this is another story in the movie business. Like I said about Diva, like being a muse for me. She opened up a lot of other doors besides like just that we were to spend our time together. But like in the '90s, she introduced me to this guy Frederick Zolo. He's not a household name, but he's like a big Broadway producer, and he's produced maybe close to maybe 25 or 30 films through the years. And his big movies were the ones you would know are Mississippi Burning
Hmm.
and Quiz Show. That's his best one. But that's really like a Robert Redford movie. But Fred's like one of the producers of it. But but he did a lot of Broadway stuff. Like I think he's had 50 Broadway plays he's produced. He started out when in the '80s he was like a hot shot up and coming producer, and he did like the David Ray plays, and David Mamet, like a lot of his early stuff, and he did like some August Wilson and all this other. He has a lot of credits under his belt. He was a very legitimate guy, but so I became, we were introduced. and I became friends with him, and we started like hanging around together. We became pals, and we're partying. At some point, after I with the world after like the 9/11, I was down when 9/11 happened. I went downtown. I heard that the place was burning, so I went downtown, and I was shooting Super 8 down there. But I thought I was going to be there for. I thought I'd be there all day. I wasn't like expecting like the building to collapse. I
Hmm.
was like stop motion, shooting a little of this and a little of that, and then the whole building came down. So I shot the thing. So I made a little film out of it. And Fred really was impressed by it. And after he saw that, then he like thought of me as a real filmmaker now. It's not the Orbitrons. And now the guy's like a legitimate filmmaker. He shot this 3 minute little thing of the World Trade Center. And that's when he started like trying to get me to, we should write a script. You should write a script. So I started writing Sweet Lorraine in 2002. And it was produced in 2007 or 2009. We shot it, and it wasn't released till 2015. And it was like a long-term thing. But like it turned out like, I'm not putting it on Fred. There's a lot of personalities involved in it, but they sabotaged the film every way they could. Like they tried stealing it out from under me, basically. Like
Hmm.
put me in debt. My credit card was in debt for 70,000 bucks when I came out of it, and all my money was invested in it, all that good cannabis money, and there was other legitimate investors in it too, but they wanted me to sign the rights over to them. So it's like I made all these films in my all of 20 years up till then, and it's kind of like you're telling me now. It's like now I have to turn this thing I sweat blood over, and you're gonna cut it for me, and you're gonna do all the post production on it, and you're gonna put your music. They tried doing this, and they tried putting me in a position, and it's right out of Hollywood. I mean, it's like the oldest story in the world, and I fell for it though, because like that's just me. But so I fought them on. I stood up to them, and I came out of it with my dignity really intact, and they never thought I would finish Sweet Lorraine. They thought like there wasn't, because we started out, that film needed at least 24 days to shoot, and when I started, I was promised 21 days, and then it went down from there, and we ended up having to shoot in 17 days. So like big pieces of the film, like we never shot, like big pieces of the scene. So I had to like really cobble this thing together to make it work. I had to go shoot I had to shoot pickup shots and cutaways and all this kind of stuff to make the thing work. So it's like that kind of a story. So Fred kind of like, listen, he can take it. He's been called worse things, and I still love the guy on some level. You know what I mean? He gave me my shot. He didn't behave well afterwards, but it's his business. But but at any rate, though, at the end of this thing, Diva, who I'm talking to, they're friends. They're more than friends, and she's we started talking 6 months later, and she's telling me that like I kept her off the set. And it was like this kind of thing where it's like, I undermined her. She was going to come work and said, you want to come work on the set doing like set design or whatever you want to do, work in the art department. She wanted to. So I said, of course you can. Just talk to the people in the art department. Here they are. I introduced them. She didn't stay in touch, and she didn't show up. She was putting it on me like like you did it. You didn't want me there. And it's
Hmm.
like I had nothing to do with it. You're friends with the executive producer of the thing. Everybody else came to the set. You didn't make it. So I think she was pissed about that and said, well, I'm not going to be talking to you for a while. But now it's like 15 years went by.
Hmm.
So I don't think she's talking to me for a while. I think she meant it. But I did on her birthday recently, because she recently celebrated a big birthday. And I sent her some stills that I had pulled out, really beautiful stills from Orbitrons. And I sent her the pictures and a nice note just saying, it's been a while, wishing you a happy birthday. Here's some nice pictures from the old days. But I never heard back from her. So I must be on our FU list for forever. So that's how it is. But, we may meet again. Who knows? I don't know what she's doing, though. Like, I don't really hear anything about her. She lives upstate, like in New Paltz area.
Hmm. Well, let's dive into Sweet Lorraine, which I'm a big fan of that film. Let's start first with the cast. Um, the lead actress, Tatum O'Neal. You have Scott William Winters, best known from Oz.
He's a great
Fantastic
actor,
actor.
that guy.
What's that?
That guy was a great actor, but
Yeah, he's fantastic. You've got Stephen Bauer, the great Stephen Bauer.
no,
Uh,
he's great too. They're all good. They're all very good.
Peter Green, Redfoot from Usual Suspects. I
He was
mean,
like this, he was like, he was like a little harder to. He was a more of a pain in the neck, but he could act. But yeah, he was cool. He was a good time.
so
He was good.
how do you end up working with, you know,
Well,
very respectable
yeah,
actors?
well, that's all through Fred's legitimate. I mean, they didn't see the teenage mummy of the Orbitrons and go, "I really want to work with Chris." He looks like no, Fred gave me the legitimacy to like, and now you can work with Tatum O'Neal, an Academy Award winning actress. It's like it's not through me. Their agents told them, well, Fred Zolo, he's married to Barbara Broccoli. Barbara Broccoli, like Cubby Broccoli's daughter. So she's like the James Bond heiress. And like the James Bond producer. Her and her brother are making they make James Bond movies. You know what I mean? So it's like she's at the top of the field. So Fred's married to her, and you want to go work for Fred. That's what their agents are telling them. They didn't know me from anybody. Some of them liked me well enough, and I got on with everybody for the most part. But that was it. Fred, it was really Fred. Fred being as legitimate as he was, he's the only reason it happened. But he kind of like he brought me to it. He brought me to the party. Then he pulled the rug out from under at the end because I wasn't like behaving like I was supposed to, like knuckle under to all of this stuff. And that's really what happened. That's the long and short of that.
And I would recommend Sweet Lorraine to anybody who's God, how do I describe this one? I would say it's like film noir meets The Sopranos. Uh,
Yeah, I
it,
never watched The Sopranos. I have watched a bit of noir in my time, but like, yeah, yeah, it's supposed to be a comedy. I mean, that's the way I wrote it. It was supposed to be a screwball comedy.
yeah, I
And
mean
uh,
there's definitely vibes of it in the film. I mean, there are some
yeah, it's not
really
like
great funny scenes in this movie. The
yeah, it's
Steve
not.
Bauer character is such a piece of shit. It just makes it fantastic.
Oh, he's beautiful. Yeah, yeah, he's really funny. He was like hamming it up, like for all he was worth, but in a good way that the script called for it. He knew how. Those guys. I didn't have to tell them too much. They knew how to play it. They said, "You want it? How do you want? How do you want me to do this?" And like, I told Scott Winters, I told him, well, put a little like of a Norman Bates kind of vibe to your person. And I swear to God, when I look at it, I see that like he did channel Norman Bates a little bit.
Mm.
And, they all, it really more than anything, I told them to play it straight. Don't play it like you're delivering punchlines. Like it's like you're serious. So it's like the humor goes over in some places and it doesn't go over in other places. I'll tell you one detail of that. Like before I saw that, when I was writing Sweet Lorraine, I went to Film Forum and I saw Preston. I can't think of his name, but it was Preston Sturgis's son. I can't think of his name, but something Sturgis. It was Preston Sturgis's kid, and he's up there. They played some movie or another, Lady Eve or one of these movies, and he was talking afterwards, and he mentioned like, there was like parts of it that were cut out, and like, he shot other scenes that didn't get used. He said at some point, like, there's a chef that's presenting like he has like a big ornate like birthday cake or some kind of like wedding cake or something that he made, and the guests walk in and they're like all like looking at the cake and oohing and on like, oh, what a beautiful cake it is, and oh my goodness, look at this cake. And the chef goes, what'll it be tomorrow? And so no one, when he told the joke, no one laughed. Anybody sitting in Film for him, no one laughed at it but me. So I'm like, well, I'll take that joke and I'll put it in Sweet Lorraine. I've got a good place for it, and I threw it into Sweet Lorraine. Tony Romano, she's playing Lou's wife. She delivers the line like really well. No one ever laughed. I've never gotten a laugh out of that line still. So like it was a dud joke in the 40s, and no one gets it still. But I thought it was funny.
Right, right. Well,
Um,
the low-hanging fruit obvious question here with respect to Sweet Lorraine. Well, there's a couple, but the first one is, how would you characterize the experience of working with Tatum?
well, she was rough. She's emotional. She has emotional things like she's dealing with in her world. and I think when we got in, she expected, and and she should have. She was working fairly cheap, but we weren't paying her a fortune. But she expected to be treated better. I treated her well. The people around her, the crew, and everybody there, they treated her nicely. But like Fred Zolo, he wasn't instilling any kind of confidence in anything. He was behaving poorly, and she saw that we were starving out there. Like the food was terrible, and like the funding was like not in place. Like he was trickling it into the account, where it's like I think like 12 days into this thing, it's like somebody from the crew telling me like the crew's ready to walk out if they don't get paid like by the end of the day.
Mm.
And it became this kind of a drama where it's like, why is this even necessary? I mean, it's like it's making life harder. And I don't think Tatum, he didn't make a good first impression, and he didn't make any good impressions at all on her. And she called him a scumbag at some point. She was talking to me about him at the late in the shoot, and I said she said something about him, and I said, well, you've been around, like, so you know what kind of guy Fred is. And she looks at me and goes, yeah, scumbag. So Tatum was cool. She's a lot cooler than me. I can promise you that much. And like she was great. And at the time she was a pain in the ass, but I took it in good stride. I took it in stride. And she delivered, like when it came time to like knowing her lines and like delivering the stuff as best she could. She always came through, and she was great. And she just has a really good, she had a good, beautiful face to photograph. And the fact is about Sweet Lorraine too, we had no rehearsal time. We had one table reading on the Saturday night. We were starting to shoot on Sunday in the Bronx.
Wow.
And
Wow.
like the thing wasn't even cast yet. Scott Winters came on. He was the last guy to come on. He came on like that Saturday afternoon. He wasn't at the reading, I don't think. We did this one table reading with half the cast, and then that was all the rehearsal we had. So it was like really on them. So it was like a poorly run thing. It was like didn't have to be, but it was like real kind of shabby treatment that all got, and some nerves were on edge. There was a lot of frayed nerves going around, people having nervous breakdowns, and we worked in a house like the one of the Baba's house over there. It was filled with mold. And a
Mm.
lot of people, after like a couple days into working there, they all went to the hospital with like horrible coughs.
Oh,
And I left the set like by the end of the thing, I had the cough too, because we finished up there too. We shot probably 4 days at that house and around that house and in that area. And I had this horrible like lung disease, like from sucking up the black mold in this house. So it was all of that. It was like it wasn't like a pleasant thing. It's only pleasant. It's pleasant because I was like at the top of my game doing like what I wanted to do, and it was like so. Then that I wasn't going to be pissy about it, and so I wasn't like particularly. It didn't really, I couldn't. It was hard, to see how bad it actually was. But it was for me, it was fine. But I think if you were working there as an unpaid PA or like an extra or something, I think it was probably really tough work. So like, it wasn't a happy set. I
mm.
tried to be happy, and I tried to walk above all of this stuff, the politics of it all, and like just try to like kind of focus on what I had to do. And really, what I had to do on that set was hang around like pulling pages out of my script and like going like crossing this out and like cross circling this and crossing it and trying to figure out what I'm going to shoot and what I'm going to have to leave behind. So it was all that distraction. So it was just
Well,
that it's nothing new. Like I said, it's all nothing new. I read a Peter Biskin book afterwards about the '90s, like the what do you call it? It was it's like the new wave, like the started like they say it started with sex lies and videotapes in like the late '80s.
right, right. Yeah,
The
yeah.
stream of independent films that came out, like everything and everything, Pulp Fiction, all this stuff, all those movies from the '90s. That was like a real fertile time for movie making. Um, but I read that book afterwards, and it's like describing exactly what I'm living, like what I was living at the time. And I mentioned to one of the producers after I read it, I said, John, you ever hear this book, Peter Biskin, about the '90s film scene? And he's like, oh, yeah, I read it. I'm like, you read it? You read the fucking thing? And this is how you're acting? And yeah, it was like, that was that. And he was like, yeah, I guess so. I guess he had to follow the blueprint, like I said, I'm a guy with often with a Pollyanna streak in me, sadly. Yeah.
Well, I mean that's the funny thing about any kind of art or creative endeavor. Whether it's a film in your case, Sweet Lorraine, being a viewer, I watched it obviously not knowing any of the backstory, you
Yeah.
know, and I saw it for what
Much
it
better
was.
that way.
What's that?
Oh, it's much better that way without
Yeah,
knowing.
well, I mean, that's the point. It's like, I talk to musicians all the time who've put out, in my view, extraordinary albums, and they're like, the bass is off on the second verse on side two, or, I'll publish a book and I'm like, I missed a semicolon on on page 42. But the thing is, the beauty of it is
Oh,
the recipient's not going to know any of that.
no.
So we can't separate ourselves from what we do because we see all the mistakes, all the missed opportunities, but the viewer is going to see hopefully the intent behind all that blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you on that, of course. Yeah, I'm like overly, I'm overly critical of it in a way, and I'm just really telling what happened.
Yeah.
But in fact, I'm very happy for the movie. And I said, as producer, they didn't want me to finish this film. They wanted to like me to like be starving, and they were going to take it off my hands for me. And I don't know, do what with it. I don't know. But like by the time it came out, I started in 2002, and I was thinking it's going to be a girl power movie. It's going to be girl power, like the Powerpuff Girls or something. And meanwhile, we get, but by the time it came out in 2015, like girl power was a thing that nobody said anymore. It was like, that was like now it was like it was like a whole different movement at this point. Like the thing was a little bit like out of sync with the times by the time it was like released in 2015. It looked like a throwback to some other world
Mm.
uh, or another time, which it was really by the time anybody saw it. So,
Now,
um,
you sent me, I watched some of it. I didn't have time to get through all of it, but you sent me a link to something called Sweet Lorraine's Diary.
my favorite.
So tell me a bit about that.
That's better than Sweet Lorraine, but I promise you that much.
Well, what I saw of it was I saw about 40% of it. It's kind of like the remix.
It's like the dub version.
Yeah. So what exactly is the aim of Sweet Lorraine's Diary?
Sweet Lorraine's Diary. I started dreaming that up like as I was cutting Sweet Lorraine. At that time, I was thinking about what to do. And then when I got, but I cut that stuff all, Sweet Lorraine, we did in a studio with editors. I went out to California. I spent a month out there hanging around on Venice Beach and Santa Monica, drinking Ivy Gimlets, an Ivy Gimlet, a place called the Ivies up there with red roses, red flowers growing on it. I was hanging a day drinking and cutting all night with this guy, David Raymond, who was a fantastic guy, a really good editor. He assembled it initially. And over here, I worked with old people from like the House of Music. I don't know if you remember the House of Music, but that's where we recorded some of the.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, there was a place up in the reservation up in the South Mountain. But they still, I still had a connection to them, so I worked in their studio and other studios, and so I did that like that. But now, at some point, I got Final Cut Pro, so I was like able to cut myself now. I cut a few things on that. Then I went on to Adobe, and now I'm pretty good with Adobe now. It took a lot of years to become like a proficient at it, and I'm using 10% of it, but I'm enough for what I'm looking to do. And so Sweet Lorraine's Diary, I started cutting that years ago, like years. I cut that for years and years, putting it together, and it really has like a biographical or autobiographical thing to it. A lot of the old corpses come out in it, and it's pointed, but it's like it's it's just a real pleasure. It was like a really like it's when I see it and when I was cutting it, I was completely thrilled by it. And really like the premise of the film was like a big fuck you. It was like a big fuck you movie is what the thing was. And I'm really happy that I cut it. And whoever gets their feelings hurt or doesn't like it or doesn't understand it, that doesn't bother me in the slightest. And but I think people will roll with that movie. And I think I'm going to premiere that film at WFMU at the Monty Hall during their marathon.
Oh
I
wow.
think that the date is October 20th as of right now. So Sweet Lorraine's Diary. Save that date.
Yeah, yeah, I gotta see if I can get down there for that for sure.
Well, like I said, I'll let you know. You'll definitely know. I'll definitely let you know ahead of time on that. But anyway, yeah, Sweet Lorraine's Diary. This is a film that's like it's in 7 chapters, and I intended it. You could watch them in any order you want to watch them in, and it won't make any difference. And the and there's there's 7 separate things, but it really builds to its climax, and my poor friend Zenin, this guy, the second chapter of it is something that's bad Russian, bad Ukrainian. I don't know if you saw that part.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is a film that Zenin wrote. The guy who's in it, the painter, he committed suicide in 2012. We shot that film in 90, 97, 98, something like that. And that was his film, but we never really did anything with it because I really didn't have I really didn't have the facility to do it in. But then, it was, I always liked it though. I shot it. He was like really directed it and he starred in it. And that was Ella. That was my secretary. That was his muse in it. The girl with the black wrap. And so yeah, so that was like a suicide themed film. He dies at the end of it.
Hmm.
There's the suicide prayer is at the comes up at the end. It's a really tragic, horrible story, really. So there's a lot of like a Sweet Lorraine's Diary. A lot more emotion went into that film than I put into Sweet Lorraine. Sweet Lorraine, like I put very little emotion to it. It was like I cut that like a surgeon, without too much feeling because it was kind of had a hard edge to it, where it wasn't like the people weren't like, you know, they weren't like soft, mushy people with each other. It was like they were a pretty bunch of hard asses, the whole crowd of them.
Hmm.
The other beautiful detail of Sweet Lorraine is like basis of the story, like the skeleton of it, like that there's a minister that like runs for office with an Italian guy kind of thing. That's a true story from I went to a Methodist church when I was a kid, and it's true like that part of it's true, the details of it. And Lorraine was the minister's wife, and it was like a lady I grew up with. I saw her a few years ago. I went and visited her out there, and they were funny, like I hadn't seen them in years, and I went to the door, and the daughter answered, Betty Ann, and she said, I said, oh, I'm looking for like the Roberts house. Like they had moved. She said to me, she said, oh, you mean like the Roberts family that you made a movie about? I said, yeah, that Roberts family. So then Lorraine came out, and the Reverend came out, and we talked about we had, we're having a laugh about it. But the Lorraine, Mrs. Roberts told me that she said I heard my characters running around like screwing
Hmm.
around all over town with everybody. I said, well, it's not quite that, I mean, you're the heroic figure in it. I told her, I explained it to her. But yeah, that was based on true events.
Well,
The Sweet Lorraine movie, yeah, it was like it's an epic thing. It really, the feeling from it, it goes back really, it's like from childhood, all of that stuff. It's like, that's where I learned all of that. That's where it all comes from.
yeah, well, it's a very New Jersey tale to me.
Right, New Jersey. Yeah. It's like Bridge and Tunnel movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's look, I worked in Jersey, but before I moved up here, I was raised in Jersey. We know we know what it's about. I'm watching
Yeah.
the dynamics, and I'm like, this could be like I'm watching my neighbors.
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah. That and it's funny. The political scandals in New Jersey never end. And like I think one of those big Democratic bosses just got arrested, and he's up on charges. Like he's like I'm trying to think of his name, but he's like a South Jersey guy. But his lawyer's been arrested. It's like all of this stuff, and his brother. It's like a big, huge scandal. He's like a real party boss, like for South Jersey. He's like
Yeah.
a power broker guy. And of course, Robert Menendez is his trial's ongoing. He's like caught with the gold bricks and all that stuff. It's New Jersey. And where were you from in New Jersey?
Well, I grew up in northern New Jersey, up in the sticks, like Sparta, Ogdensburg.
Florida. That was like the woods when we were kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked for a long time. Went to school at Montclair, and I worked in Nutley for a bunch of years. And look, the sun goes down in that part of town, man. The shit goes down. But you know, uh, uh, I remember one night I was smoking outside the office I was working at because I work in media. I was doing publishing at the time. So, the deadline is when you're done. You're clocking out at 5 o'clock. Not in that business. You're working all night.
Yeah.
So I'm out having a smoke break and a woman walked by with a fur coat. I gave her a wave and she kind of like gave me a weird look. I didn't think anything of it. 10 seconds later, I'm surrounded by the guys, you got business here?
Who's that now?
That was where I was working.
Oh, but I mean, who were the people that were surrounding you?
They were the neighborhood watch.
Oh, really?
So
You look
these
like a punk.
no, not really. I mean, at least I didn't think so. I mean, I was working, I jeans
You
and a
were at a
t-shirt,
job.
but I
Yeah.
was smoking a cigarette in an alley and it was late, you know.
Oh, okay.
So this lady walks by, she's got the fur coat on. I say, hello, good
Oh,
evening. And she kind of like shuffled away. And within seconds, I'm surrounded by people, the guys, you got business here? And I'm like, oh, I'm just having a cigarette, like, so you work around here? Where do you work? And I told them where I worked. And they're like, yeah. And I showed them my business card. They're like, oh, okay, we know who you're with. No problem. The lady walked by. She was a little concerned. We wanted to make sure everything was okay. It's late at night. You're smoking in the alley, but you're okay. We know your guys up there. No problem. You have a great night. And they, gave me the pat and they walked away. But that's Jersey.
yeah, I guess so, man. I got the heck out of there. I guess you did too.
I mean but in a way, I like that self-policing culture. There are certain neighborhoods you don't have to worry about drugs being dealt. You know what I mean? And that's not such a bad thing.
Yeah, I hate to feel like I'm intimidating some woman like walking by in her fur coat though, or like that somebody would look at me and go, "Oh, you're harassing this lady," or whatever they're thinking, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's the furthest thing from my imagination that I really want to do.
I totally wasn't. I was just having a smoke and said
And
hello.
normal.
But I was new in the neighborhood. They didn't know who I was. It was late at night. I was in this alley having a smoke. Probably looked like hell because I've been working like an 18-hour day. And it was like, we don't know this guy, and he's in our neighborhood this time of night. We got to go check
That's
this
in
guy
Nutley.
out. Yeah.
Nutley. That's okay. It's old town,
Yeah.
old place.
So I mean,
Probably very tight in there.
it scared the shit out of me because I was in my early 20s at the time. But I realized quickly, it's like, again, it's like, the neighborhood takes care of itself. Do I think they were a little overzealous? Yes. But at the same time, I was a new face late at night, not from the neighborhood. The lady was like, who's this weirdo in the alley smoking a cigarette? We got to go
Oh,
check this guy out.
yeah, well, but they were sensible about it. They figured it out. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
it's
still
the
here.
right outcome. Yeah.
I'm not swimming with no fishes. But so where is the best place for people to check out your films online, including Sweet Lorraine and the
Well,
Orbitron?
all that stuff is on Vimeo. I think Sweet Lorraine's up there. It doesn't have a password or anything, so anybody could really watch Sweet Lorraine. It is. I have to start digging through that stuff at some point. There's a little thing that got left out of it, and there's all these different like final versions of it, the final file. Like there's all these different versions, and some of them, the color looks better on this one than that one on a small screen. And then maybe if you project, the color might be better on this one than that one. I have to figure all that stuff out. But I think the one that's on Vimeo is like, looks good. People watch it occasionally. I hear back from people to watch Sweet Lorraine. So yeah, if anybody is interested, they can go there. Or I think that might be playing out in Brooklyn one of these days. I'm gonna get a gig for that movie coming up. It's been a lot of years now.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I suspect, knowing what I know about the people who regularly follow my channel here, um, I would recommend checking out Sweet Lorraine. I'll put the links in the video description. I think it'll appeal to the sensibilities of my audience.
Oh,
Uh,
great. Yeah, because they don't know, and that's a very weak point for me is like I'm not really like I'm not that outgoing. I'm outgoing by degrees, but it's like I'm not like social media. It's like I don't take advantage of it as much as I can,
Hmm.
or I should probably. So like
But you
people
know,
don't really know the film at all.
it's funny you mention that because when you and I crossed paths and we started talking about doing this interview, I was kind of looking around for your movies, and it wasn't immediately apparent. I kind of had to dig around to find it. And I know economically and in terms of PR, not the best way to go sometimes. But I gotta tell you, man, I love the fact that I had to like treasure hunt my way to Sweet Lorraine. It's like when I first discovered Lynch when I was a young kid by accident. The first time I saw Eraserhead was by accident. That was kind of the experience I had with your stuff. It's like you kind of find this hidden doorway somewhere, and boom, there's Ghost Lynn Films. So uh, that was my experience with it.
Well, it's great that you were able to find it, and now I feel like since I've been able to reconstruct some of these old films, the Orbitrons in particular, the Mummy, and I did The Stranger. So I'm redoing all these old films, and they're just better looking now. So now it's like a body of work.
Mhm.
I don't know. So it's like it's individual films, but I think I have something I can work with. So I'm really out looking for a screening. These people at the Slipper Room, or I'm not working. I'm working as a doorman at the Slipper Room, the famous, world famous Slipper Room. People who run the place, or the owners of the place, they had a movie Monday going there for. They used to do movie Mondays like for a spell, like for a couple of years, I guess it happened, and they really helped me out. It was really incredible. Really, I got to play there multiple times, but in front of like not my friends. It wasn't like for once. It wasn't like Jim Dunleavy and Lenny in the audience and my brother. You know what I mean? But it was like all strangers, and that's the real thrill, is playing in front of strangers. And the films always went over pretty well there. A couple of them. It's a funny thing there. One night though, The Stranger played, which is one of my favorites, but like no one ever liked it. But it's really a good looking film actually. But halfway through it, 2/3 of the way through it, something happened in the movie, and everybody got up and they cleared the room. And that was that, though. So it cleared rooms 30 years ago, the last time it played, and I played it 30 years later at the Slipper Room, where it's generally a friendly audience, and they all left for that too. So there you go. Some things never change. But yeah, those guys were a big help to me, and now I finally penetrated WFMU, a place that wouldn't have me. But I'm friends with Glenn Jones. He's a guy I know from the House of Music too. So I go back with him like a lot of years at this point, and he took a like, we always liked each other, so he's had me on his show and helped me out, and he got me the gig there. Really, now a new person came on board booking that venue.
Mhm.
Uh, she was more like open to having me there. It's
That's
formally,
great. I'm
yeah,
gonna,
it's a good place to play.
yeah, I'm gonna try like hell to get down there for that. I mean, I've always loved FMU. Any opportunity I have to get down and breathe that FMU air in some
Uh,
way, I'm delighted to do so for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I go back with them quite a ways, really, since I was pretty young. Definitely from the old college when I was at the college.
The Uppsala College?
At Uppsala way back when. I remember
Yeah.
going out to visit them there.
Yeah, I started playing there back when it was in the house in East Orange.
East Orange, yeah.
Yeah. Pat Duncan show
Pat
Thursday
Duncan show,
night.
yeah. Yeah, I remember going to visit Pat Duncan over there, and we used to bring him around. We're delivering records periodically, bringing over the buy our record stuff, new releases. That
Yeah.
was the first stop, I think, the way I remember it.
As it should be.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Oh,
Diane's been
yeah,
on
yeah.
the channel, and I was playing Pat's show when I was still in high school. I think I was 17 years old.
What was the names of your bands that you were in?
Oh God, that band. My first band, my first real band that was playing shows was a band in high school called the Anotherance. We made up the name, but I was young. They were a couple years older than I was, the other two guys in the band. I was 15, 16 when we
Oh,
started playing the pipeline, stuff like that. But we played Patch Show when I was a senior in high school. Then I played in a couple Oi bands in Jersey, Broken Heroes and Squiggy.
we were
Um,
in Broken Heroes. Yeah, I know those guys a little anyway. Andy and
Andy, yeah, Andy plays bass for them now. I just saw Andy a couple weeks ago, actually. Uh,
I can't think of, the other guy that was like he was with them forever. He was with Nebla Kenbane,
Larry?
Larry.
Yeah, Larry's down in,
He's in like Carolina or somewhere down south, I think, right?
yeah, he's been on the channel. He's got a band called oh my God, M80.
M80.
It's either M80 or M60. Larry, I'm sorry. It's been a long day. I love you. You know that.
Yeah, it's just a
Um, but he's a great guy. And then I
yeah.
was in the Undead for a bunch of years, Electric Frankenstein for a bit.
You played with all those guys, huh?
Yeah, then I was in this industrial thing called Pigface for like 18 years on and off.
Jeez.
That's like Martin Atkins, the old Core Tavern scene in the 80s and Killing Joke and all those bands. Um,
Oh, those were cool groups.
yeah, so I've been dragging my drum set through the snow and hail for many, many years. That's how I,
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, that's a labor of love too, for certain. You know?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's that I got my start early 90s going to, playing shows. Um, and I was always very into the New Jersey scene. I wanted to learn about the history of the scene that I was growing up in my state, which led me to investigate buy our records and all that stuff. So to fast forward to 2024 and to have this series on YouTube where I'm talking to Emilio and Lenny and fucking Kaprowski and all these different people, it's been a real pleasure for me.
Yeah, Emilio. I can't say enough good things about that guy. Really, but like I tell him whenever if I see him on social media, he always gets the big heart and his wife and family. I'm always happy to see them. And yeah, he was a huge help to me. But he gave me the keys to that place.
Yeah.
I remember sleeping up in the DJ booth up there shooting films, and we shot Hearst there. We shot The Stranger there. We didn't shoot any of the Mummy there, but we definitely shot those three. Like a big, we used every room, the bathroom, the stage, the main room, the bar. We shot at the outside, the back of the place, the side of it. We shot every angle of the place. So yeah, it was so Emilio was really kind to me, but it was like really it was huge. Really, I couldn't have gotten started without him. Really,
Uh, well, the same can be said from a lot of people with respect to that guy.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, like I said, I was either 15 or 16 playing the pipeline. The first time I played there, my dad drove me to the club.
Oh, really? I love
Like,
that.
there's no fucking way you're driving to Newark with your friends, riding in the car with your friends. I'll drive you down there,
That's beautiful.
So I mean, yeah, I have a history with that place and with Emilio. He's, great, great, great people. Always was.
I was going to say that when I the first concert I went to, it was in Asbury Park at the convention hall. It was Black Oak, Arkansas, and Foghat.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the minister and his wife Lorraine and their son, they drove us to they drove. That was like how I got to my first gig. Somebody's parents drove me there. Is what I'm getting at, which is
Wow.
like really not hip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was too cool. I didn't look cool doing it, but like it was the only way. So off we went.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
yeah,
was
got
I
there.
was so young going to shows that, my mother would actually drive me to shows when I was in
Oh,
grade
off
school.
around the corner here.
You know, I
You're
mean,
carrying drums though too on top of it. That was just
yeah,
dark.
yeah. I mean, it's, people ask me what it was like, doing music all these years. I'm like, well, you take your drums and you walk up steps that have an inch of piss and puke on them, and you walk through the hail, and you load it in the trunk of your car, and then you skid for 2 hours driving home. Like, if it's not torrential downpouring for a while, if you haven't had a bad storm for a while, book a fucking show. Because it's like doing a rain
I'll
dance.
bring it out. Yeah.
It hasn't
There's
snowed
a lot of
for a
things to
while,
go
book a
down out
show.
there. Yeah, a lot of things, a lot of the things you don't imagine happening, they happen. But when you,
In hindsight, it's all beautiful stuff. Even
oh
the
yeah,
craziness, it's I wouldn't trade that time for anything. Being a young kid playing FMU, on a Thursday night, and coming home 2, 3 in the morning because I'm driving up to the sticks from being with Pat and Diane too, and that whole crowd down there. I mean, I played FMU, I think 7 or 8 times on Pat's show over the years. Um, Always a great experience. There's such a culture in New Jersey that I'm trying to, give a history to with what I'm doing on YouTube now because I don't think people realize until they start digging in how much really happened in this state and continues to happen in Jersey.
oh, a lot of like musical talent comes out of there, no question about that. There's a lot of good players and a lot of jazz players that came out of there too. Out of the North, there was a scene down in Newark in the after the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Like there was real people, real clubs, and you know, it's a place that's a musical community, really. And then like South Jersey has that whole separate kind of a scene going on. A lot of things come out of there.
Yeah. So the wrap things up, I know you have this upcoming thing at FMU in October. What does the rest of your 2024 look like as far as your projects or things in the foreseeable future you're working towards?
Yeah, I have some bits I'm going to do a shoot probably later in the summer. I have a film that I have to fill in. Like it's kind of an art project, but it's an old film, beautiful old stuff that I shot. It's like a New York film. It's like the alleyway and the interiors of the apartment, the building. It's contemplative type of a movie. But I don't know what you'll contemplate, but it's that kind of a vibe to it. But it's like a poetic type of a movie. There's bits I have to shoot for it to make it whole now. So I cut it. I transferred the old footage. I cut it to everything. Now I have to shoot like a couple of rolls of black and white film. I have to shoot, but it's going to require. I'm going to have to light it, and it's really going to take. Uh, I'm going to have to build myself up to like I have to prepare. Preparations before I just can't like pull a camera out and shoot it. It's like I got to. I'm going to be shooting it in the same set, but it's 30 years later. The apartments. I've been in this apartment for 30 odd years now. So it's that. So I'm working on that. It doesn't even have a working title. And there's other things I'm going to shoot. I'm going to start. I'll probably shoot silent a lot of. I'll probably, I've been shooting all these like last 10 years or so. I've been shooting mostly silent things.
Hmm.
And like something like their Fledermaus, I shot it silent because I was trying to impersonate to the degree like a Nosferatu, like a silent movie looking vibe I was going for. And it's the real pure film, doing it without speaking, separated from the theater.
Right.
So yeah, I'm hoping to get working. I'm back. I'm working in the slipper room now as a doorman. I work there a day or two every week. I'm with good people, very talented people around, and I can imagine doing something with them. Hopefully, there's a lot of characters, a lot of like enthusiastic people who are like younger than me, but like and then that's how it always was. It was people who like who would come and act in a film for nothing, like just to do it.
Hmm.
That's what I have to do. I can't really like come up with like any kind of real budget anymore. But yeah, I just plan on keeping shooting, and I have a lot of editing to do. There's still like I have film that like I've never done anything with that I shot over the long years. So there's lots I can do. I have options still. But more than anything, that I have this body work, I have like a few films that I can really get behind, like the Orbitrons. I think is good, like an audience will like it. And I think Sweet Lorraine's Diary is going to go over well too. So I have them. I really have to find screenings for them. And now it's like you can screen a film almost any place.
Hmm.
I'm looking for, I mean, I'm looking to play in front of an audience that's not my usual audience. In front of strangers, basically, is what I really like would prefer to play in front of. So that's what I'm kind of working towards now. I'm lazy about it though, you know. I could hang around and cut these things all night, 14-hour days, 16 hours working into the 5 in the morning, like when the sun's coming up, and then I'm, turning the computer off. But actually, like making the phone calls and like seeking out the people and trying to like follow up on things, I'm really slow at it. And like, yeah, I could like drag it on and like, it's just it could go on. But I am in touch. I'm like getting better, slowly improving at that. I've in fact, if you talk to Tommy Kaprowski, I asked him for like if I can I come out and run Deflator Moss before because he saw the film and liked it. So I'd like to come run it before, like if you're doing a local gig, like a morning noise gig or whoever you're playing with. And he goes, oh yeah, yeah, but I think but I never got back. And then he's playing arenas now in like football stadiums.
Right.
I'm not going to be playing there. So the guy ever plays someplace small, hopefully he'll see this and hear this. But I haven't followed up on that either. I could call him up and say, well, what about my gig? When you're playing your next gig, when are you going to like come out and play with you? I haven't asked, but I did go to the arena, and that was fantastic. And I think I told you this before, but like, yeah, that's it. I'm looking for a place to play. I'd love to play in New Jersey. I gotta definitely go play in Brooklyn. I've played in Coney Island a few times. Sweet Lorraine, in fact, played at the Coney Island Film Festival, but I
Cool.
couldn't get it anywhere else. All of Fred's films, they all played in Toronto. They all played like all over, like Telluride and all these like, beautiful places. And my film, I ended up on Coney Island with it on like a Sunday afternoon, which was cool. But like, yeah, like, yeah. So I'm looking for a gig, basically. I really would like to screen it. I probably like the Slipper Room. Will probably do another movie Monday one of these days, and they'll have me down there. They're kind of stuck with me now. So that's it. I'm really looking to screen some of the things I have and work on whatever I can work on, new stuff. I got ideas I kick around. I have an old script I could pull out and work on that some more too. I don't know if I'd ever find funding for it though. It would need money to shoot the thing. Even
Mm.
if I shot it on my phone, it would need money. So yeah, so I'm a filmmaker. I mean, now it's 40 years of it. So what am I going to do? I can't really change my act at this point.
Nor
But
should.
I knew I wasn't God's little musician, though. I knew I wasn't going to be a musician. It never was going to happen. Uh, or I was like Tommy was saying, he never got any better at it. But he did, he really actually did get better. But I knew I was never going to. I wasn't a natural. I couldn't write a song either, really. But a film, I could shoot a film, though. I could manage to get in focus.
Well,
So,
it's all from the same creative place, that sort of
oh,
anarchic punk rock spirit.
that
I
stuff was
friends.
always that is the inspiration, really, for all of it. That moment, like in 1980, like the punk bands, they were what they were, like the original ones. But like the hardcore thing, once that got rolling, then it was like anything goes now. You can do, you know, the world is my oyster. I can do any damn thing I feel like it, but everybody else is around me, so why not? So you know, I'm still carrying that attitude. So I picked that attitude up from punk rock, and it stuck with me. I don't listen to so much punk rock, but like the attitude never changed, and the inspiration I got from it is everything really. Because you couldn't go see Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and like, well, I'm gonna be just like that. I'm gonna like be like David Gilmour, But like you can look at the guys in Crowd or whatever, and like, or guys from AOD and go, well, I can manage like the bash on my guitar, like just kind of like something like them. Maybe not quite as good, but yeah. So it's a big moment, the hardcore scene. And it's funny you're talking about it. You're saying to these guys like how much of an impact it has, and it's amazing really that you see that hardcore. Like there's still guys that are playing hardcore that are young people that are playing hardcore, and it's like Christ. It's like it's still going around. Like people still play like that style. Playing that style.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
like mash up any style now, but like that's and I think it is a thing for young people. I really do think like that kind of sound is like really like for a young man, you know. You gotta have a lot of testosterone left.
Well, I mean, it kind of makes sense when I look at your trajectory, from being, you know, early on playing with like the pre-Bedlam guys to what you're doing now. It makes sense because I think hardcore, you know, even when I was coming up in like the late 80s to mid 90s, a lot of my peers,
Oh, it was huge then. That was when it's peak the peak of it.
but it didn't just become okay, we're gonna do this hardcore music for like 3 or 4 years, and then we're gonna do something else and be,
How about
you know,
prog band?
yeah, it was like, okay, maybe the music stopped, like maybe being in a band wasn't long lived for everyone, but people went on to be writers and publishers,
Oh, they did a
artists.
yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like hardcore was the
Yeah.
template, and then you move forward and you do something different with the same mindset.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I see it. And you see, like, if you're on social media, Facebook, and all these old people on there, like, you see, like, oh, yeah, they were in some band 50 years ago and 40 years ago. You see, they've moved on. They're painters, they're artists, they're architects, they're everything. They're authors, they're all kinds of, people moved on. And like I said, it was the green light that was given to
Yeah.
everybody in a way that said you could. You didn't need like a really elite education. You didn't have to come from like a literary background. You could be a writer without having a literary background. As long as you could string sentences together and make a paragraph out of them, you were in business. So,
Well, I mean, even with zine culture, Sex Bomb from Seizure sent me a great package the other day of Connecticut punk
oh,
ephemera. And he sent me the zine he put out back in the day. That's a great example, you know.
oh yeah, that was always great seeing the free ones, and even the ones you paid $1 for or 50 cents or whatever. It was like I have a bunch of them hanging around the house still. They were great. They were like really unique things, you know. You can't even imagine anybody making, well, I guess people still do, but it's like you don't have to anymore. It's like an online thing. It doesn't have the charm as an actual piece of paper. It
Yeah.
stayed.
I mean, that shift has its advantages and disadvantages.
Uh,
I miss print zines, but at the same time, doing something like this has kind of become the new zine.
yeah,
And
it's better. It's really
you're not
yeah,
cutting down trees either, you
yeah.
know.
So, yeah,
Eh,
and you're not piling up paper in your house,
Right.
which there's enough of it in the house already. My house is filled with it. uh,
Yeah. I
but
bore my background for a reason because it's a nightmare back
oh,
there.
yeah. That's funny. I tried to decorate it a little bit behind me. Oh, look at that. I love like just lapsing into the dark here one more time. I'm sorry about that. I guess it's like a special effect. You can write it off as that. I don't know how it'll look like when people see it, but I don't know.
It'll be like the Jack Steeples disembodied head interview I did.
Oh, that's okay. That I can live with.
John B. Steeples.
Oh, he was always a good guy. I remember he gave me a bass lesson once. He told me, son, you know, put on one of those old Alice Cooper records if you want to hear a cool bass player. And I'm listening to him playing. Blue, 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 blue. I'm like, oh shit. Gonna take me a while to learn those scales. Um, but he was always a cool guy. Those guys were always really nice. The guys from AOD. And I'm all like, it's a happy thing they're whatever they are, they stuck around and like here they are, they're still doing it. It's like it's great, really. It's not easy, but it's not easy holding a band together.
No.
I always had real problems. But I ended up in those bands. I was like kind of like the half responsible one, and then a completely thankless position to find yourself. It's
Oh, I think I've been there more than once myself.
possible. It's terrible. And I know like there's been a lot of digressed a lot with all whatever we're talking about. I'm happy to talk to you about anything, but also too, I would like to say about Scott. He was a good guy. So he went into the Navy, and he died young too. And I knew like he was like a heavy drinker, and probably you see he was a junkie at the end, but I didn't hear from him for years. The last I'd seen him was maybe in the late '80s. He pulled up. I was at my mother's house. My mother still lived in Union, and he pulled up in a Volvo, and like he had a beard, and he was like a grown person now. I knew him when he was a little kid. I met him because I used to hang around with his brother Craig. He had an older brother Keith, and he had a sister Arlene, and I knew all that. And there was two older brothers too that I didn't know as well, but like these guys were all at home still. And so I remember going to see, hanging out with Craig and Keith. And Scott was like a several years, 4 years younger than Keith, than us, or 4 or 5 years. He was like a little kid, but he already had the drum kit in his little attic room he had, and he was already a drummer. And he was just he was like a nice kid. He had his problems, and like he did things people didn't like sometimes, but he was a good guy and a good drummer. And he was like really funny. We had a really nice bond with him. And then, so he went into the Navy, which I warned him not to, but he did it anyway. He was AWOL. Whatever happened to him, he hooked up with a girl, got married, but like I think he was a very, very heavy drinker. And at some point, he was, estranged from his family. He has a couple of children, 2 or 3 children that he left, but he was living in Bloomfield, like the Bloomfield Newark border, in an apartment. He had a roommate. And he called me up from there one morning. I was laying right here in this room, laying on the floor. My mattress used to be over here. And I answered, and I hear, "Oh, hey, it's Scott." He's talking like an alcoholic, like that raspy, like your vocal cords are torn up from boozing so much. And he was telling me what he was telling me. He's telling me, "Oh, I got a box of stuff here that's like old cassettes and like things from like the My Three Sons days." And I'm listening to it. It's like, jeez, man. That's fucking scary, sad, listening to it. But like, I was nice, and like, it was like, he left me his number, and it's like, yeah, I'll call you. But I never did, and he died soon after.
Mm.
He fell down the steps of the apartment building, and it broke his neck. And that was it. He was nodding out, I think, at the top of the stairs, and then he never woke up. He fell down to the bottom of the stairs and never woke up.
Mm.
And that's what happened to Scott eventually. I think Scott was probably 31 or 32 when he died.
Christ.
And he was a nice guy, but he was like I have like really happy memories of being him, and with his family too. His family was really a little nuttier. He was at the bottom of the food chain in the family. And his family, they were serious people, but like Scott was like a real nice guy. But I remember hanging out with him a lot. But we used to go to the midnight show. We used to go see Head and Eraserhead and all these things like at the 8th Street Playhouse. We'd come rolling over here, for midnight, and go rolling around some more at 2 in the morning after the thing ended. I remember that was a ritual with Rob and Scott hanging out with those guys, and they were nice. He was a real good bandmate. It was really it was like a good time, and I missed them. I miss these guys who died younger, even the ones that lasted till they were 60. They were really like close to my heart, Steve and Aaron for sure. I still hung around with him here from time to time, and we stayed in touch. And yeah, I missed them. They were like really close to my heart. Those guys. And Scott, he really went out young, and it was like, when I heard his voice, I just remember him as a little kid, 10 years old, playing the drums. And then flash forward 20 years, and he's like talking to me like that. It hurt to hear it. It's like hearing about Steve. Lenny's describing. I'm listening to it, and oh my God, that's just a terrible thing he's telling me here. My God. And yeah, that's it. So those guys, they meant a lot to me in life. And I said with Joe Sages, I know he's still alive. Still, he's just not talking to me for a minute, but he visits me from time to time. He would turn up like every couple of years. I saw him a couple of years ago. He was over here visiting with his new wife, and she has a daughter like that was with them. So he was a great, unique guy too. The guy Sages from My Three Sons was a really cool guy. He just dropped out. He had like a real job, and he had like middle class concerns. You know what I mean? Like he couldn't let go and like become like an artist musician. He was going to go on the road and go cruising around like being a playing clubs all and living that life. I don't think he was really up for that, and I think he was like responsible. I think his parent. I think he came from like better parents. His parents were like had an education and were like they were a little bit more like a little more buttoned down. Like I grew up in a very a loose situation at home. It was a little different. but yeah, so yeah, I miss Joe, and I'm not, he's not dead, but I'm saying, like, I gotta look him up. I miss it. My bandmates. So yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't know how long you want to have this conversation for. But I think if you have any more questions for me, or is there anything I wanted to tell you, but I said it. Did I mention my love of Emilio and all this help he's given me? I talk about Scott and all these poor people who died. I gave you like the Ghost Limb Films partial story, but there's a lot of films there, but there's a lot of ones on there. Gollywog's Cakewalk is another silent movie that's worth a look. You might get a hoot out of it.
Yeah, man, I'm still sifting through the filmography, and I'm really excited to do so because I love Sweet Lorraine. I love the Orbitrons. Um, you
Yeah, those
know,
are the bookends.
I mean, what the films you're making are absolutely up my street. It's I grew up on David Lynch. I grew up on a lot of noir. My sensibilities are still very much there as far as film. Wim Wenders is another one.
Oh yeah, yeah. But
Um,
Werner Herzog,
mm,
his Nosferatu is fantastic. Bro. This is a thing I used to go see at the midnight show at the Angelica for like it played there for a long time. I used to go see Nosferatu. And I remember seeing that at the drive-in too. I think at the Union Drive-in when I was a kid when that came out. It was like a far. I think it was dubbed at that point. But yeah, my introduction to film was like seeing the first film, like a movie looking film I ever saw was Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein, and that was like an 8 millimeter version that my uncle George had. I
mm.
remember seeing that, and like my whole world had changed. And then at some point when I moved to Union, it was a second TV, and I used to go up and watch creature features up there. I started watching like all those, and I remember watching that whole cycle of Frankenstein movies and the Wolfman and all those things. And they made a huge impression on me, a huge, huge thing. I couldn't get enough of it really. And the Wolfman was always a particular favorite. And I'll still watch that when it's on Spenguli from time. It's on there maybe once a year. But he messes it up though. Now he talks too much.
Mm.
Just take a page out of that. But the Wolfman, and then I graduated to Warner Brothers. I went into like the 30s, like gangster films. I really went in for like Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney and those that crowd, Edward G. Robinson, and yeah, and Ann Sheridan and all those people from Warner Brothers, and then after that, the whole world opened up. And as earlier, like in the earlier '70s, I started, well, the '60s, I started getting out to the movies, and I remember going to see a big moment was seeing Billy Jack. That was like a real eye opener. Going to see Billy Jack was a huge thing. But all those happy movies, yeah, like Death Wish and you know, Billy the Trial of Billy Jack and The Omen and all these films, all in the movie theaters, and it was it was fertile times for that. And then once I started driving, I was at the drive-in all the time, and I used to then to go to the grindhouse. I used to go to Irvington, to Castle, and to the Sanford Theater was still there. And I remember spending so much time in these places. And I would go to 42nd Street. I used to take the bus when I was AWOL. I would take the bus from Irvington into New York. I'd get there in the morning, and I'd go see a triple feature on 42nd Street, and then roll back in the afternoon. And another funny club I wanted to mention too, that in Irvington, that was like kind of a laughable place, but it had its phases. Was it was called Motions. It was
Motion.
right on the Newark border. It was like right past the Parkway, like the Parkway Bridge on Springfield Avenue. It was like, and it was a venue from way back then. You used to have boxing matches there and like sporting events and conventions and stuff. It was this big kind of cavernous room, and it was called Motions. And it was like a new wave, like dance place. They had like new wave cover bands that would play like the Romantics and like dance, pop music. We used to get a hoot out of it, but at some point it changed. But it was walking distance for me because I lived on Union Avenue. And then at some point it changed names, and it became a venue that like touring acts would play in. And I remember seeing all these kind of oddball groups there. Like I remember seeing the Gary Glitter in
Hmm.
Irvington, like 14 people in the audience. Paul Young, I remember seeing their Icicle Works. Remember the Icicle Works? They were like Liverpool group.
Mhm.
They were like an MTV band. And I remember seeing the Grandmaster Flash play there.
Oh, wow.
Grandmaster Flash at I think it was called Illusions or something at that point. It had like went through a couple of different names. It was Motions originally, but then they had started having like real bands playing there, and I remember that was it was cool. It was a crappy club. It was a club you went to and then laughed at afterwards. You laughed at when you were there because it sucked. It wasn't cool, you know. It wasn't like going to A7 or CBGB or something. It was like really corny. But you know, I saw some guy had some good times there. Remember seeing Joe Stages get thrown out of the place and I went out on the sidewalk and he was laying in a snowdrift. Happy little boy stuff, you know.
Yes, yes, yes. No, I mean, like I said before, I mean, Jersey really has an endless well of interesting eras and you know,
uh,
I mean, we haven't even gotten into like the Jersey Shore. I had you remember the band Shrapnel?
oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah. I remember them on Uncle Floyd.
yeah, I just recorded an interview with Phil Caivano. I'm going to post it this weekend.
Oh, okay.
You know, he's been with Monster Magnet for like 26 years now. He was in Blitzspear in the late 80s, early
They're
90s.
popular, yeah.
Sweetheart of a guy. But we took a deep dive into the Jersey Shore and he got like Mother Records and Jacko and you know that whole scene down there. And it's endless stories just Asbury. You
Oh,
know,
Asbury Park, yeah, was a lively place. But I just found out about a place called I think called the Sunshine Inn down there. Slade played there like early on. It was there for a few years, but like all those old like post Woodstock bands and all that. It was like probably a pretty big venue, but I don't remember it from when I was a kid. I found it online by chance. So I don't know what I was even looking for, but like, oh, the Sunshine Inn. And I saw like you can look at their whole all the bands that played there over this few years that it was open in the early 70s. You know, from Hot Tuna to Slade to Black Sabbath, to all those bands that were like not, you know, Black Sabbath, they weren't at the peak of their, like they weren't like big enough to play the Garden yet,
right, right.
the Capitol Theater or like this kind of a theater, the Sunshine Inn. Um, but yeah, well, another place was a hotbed too was Passaic, and I remember going up there to a place called, remember Eats You Want? Remember a place called Eats You Want?
I don't know.
I think it was a diner, but they had like punk bands there.
Hmm.
Maybe it was a clothing shop. Was there a clothing shop up there too? But Eats You Want. I don't know. It's a name that stuck with me, but it was like a strange venue in Passaic. And of course, I remember going to Hitsville.
Hmm.
It's also an awful place, but it was like, I think it was a funeral home. But they had like name brand acts there. I remember seeing the Professionals, Psychedelic Furs, by
Hmm.
Echo and the Bunnymen. And my favorite thing I saw there was Bill Nelson's Red Noise. I don't know, you know Bebop Deluxe at all?
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, his band after Bebop Deluxe was Red Noise. I think they did one little USA tour, and I saw them at the Hitsville, which was great.
There, you know, there's these little things that people don't realize happened in Jersey. Um, that place on 23, I think it's in Wayne or yeah, I think it's in Wayne. Jig's Corner. Ever heard of that place on 23? You head north on 23.
Trying to picture it all now. I remember with a record store you mentioned that was like, was that Wayne that was in that?
Yeah, the Sound Exchange slash Looney Tunes. That's 23 North in Wayne. If you're
23.
going up another like 10 minutes or so, I want to
Uh-huh.
say, you're gonna pass Jig's Corner. It's a tiny place. I think it's a restaurant. But when I was like young, um, you know, my dad would take me to shows there. Eric Burden from the Animals,
Oh,
uh,
great. Yeah. You saw
Graham
him in the 80s.
Parker.
I was seeing him in the 80s too. He's great. Eric Burden's great.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I saw Graham Parker there.
Oh,
This
well,
little like nondescript place in Wayne that you would just drive by and not even realize is there, you know.
Graham Parker found it. That's something. That's
Yeah,
funny that you mentioned him because I remember seeing him back at the Palladium, like you know, in the late '70s, whenever he was hitting, like when Squeezing Out Sparks was out.
yeah, yeah.
I didn't see him for. Well, I saw him one time later, like by like without the rumor, but I saw the Graham Parker in the room and the rumor reunion 10 years ago. Probably it played at 23rd Street, the cinema. It used to be a cinema up there, way the Waverly maybe, not the Waverly, the whatever it was, the 23rd Street place had a name, but they were fantastic. Like they still had it. They were really, really, really good. They were, you know, yeah, it was a golden moment. It was a golden moment. Uh, I don't know, like now, I don't want to, I'm not judgmental of the music. I don't really know so much new music. Because to me, I look at it, there's so much music around
Yeah.
the past 100 years and off into the future and into the present. That there's too much for me to I'll ever hear it all anyway. So I like really don't really follow the pop music of the day. But when I do hear it, I eventually hear it. It's like, no, so that's what Taylor Swift sounds like. And I don't, I've heard of Taylor Swift. I may have heard of her 10 years ago, 20 years ago, however long she's been around. Then when I finally hear the music, I'm like, I'm underwhelmed by it. It's like, not that it's terrible, or it's like, but I feel like I've heard it before, and it's like, not even, I'm not even picking on her because she's great, really. She's a generational thing, talent. But all the other bands, like after the '90s, like I really started losing track of it. Like the last band, like I really kind of got into a little bit and used to go see from time, when they were around, was King's X.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I think they're King's Cross. But like in Jersey, they always called them King's X. And I think they probably might be King's X. I never really like solved the mystery. Like, are they King's X or are they King's Cross? But everybody called them King's X. And they were kind of like a prog band. They sang in harmony. They had like a spiritual bent to their whatever where they were coming from. But that was like the really kind of the last band that I had latched onto in the '90s. I remember like the last big things I went to, the Lollapalooza, the first one, with
Hmm.
and the Banshees and Jane's Addiction.
Yeah.
I remember being up there with one of my pals, like the guy from the Mummy, Mark Puccioli, was a Navy buddy of mine.
Did you
Who
see them? Did you see that show at Waterloo Village in Stanhope?
Waterloo Village. Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
there. Yeah.
Oh, you were there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a huge crowd, a huge crowd of people. I don't know how many people were there, but it was like a pretty good crowd of people there. Butthole Surfers and Ice T, right?
Yeah. Rollins.
9 Inch Nails. Yeah, and Rollins was there. I remember. I remember tripping on LSD and being like so high. I was listening to 9 Inch Nails, and I'm like, wow, man, they sound like Jimi Hendrix. And then I went out and bought the tape like a couple of days later, and I put it in. I'm like, this doesn't sound anything like Jimi Hendrix at all. What the hell is this? Their first record. But I remember it was a really nice time. But that was like I was really coming to the end of like paying attention to it. I was really like into like jazz groups or even an orchestra. But like yeah, I really got into jazz at that time, or like older rock and roll, like R&B, like the old R&B stuff started making her like Norton Records started, we're putting out kind of that. Like they're there, or any other label, like all these labels were putting out reissuing Northern Soul, and old R&B and like '50s, like rock, hillbilly music kind of stuff. And I started getting into that stuff in those days. But I've really settled into I still listen to some prog music. I listen to like fusion and jazz groups, like from the '50s and '60s and that. Like I like the avant-garde stuff. I like the funky music like from that time too. Really like Herbie Hancock. His records from the '70s are incredible.
Mm.
And and I still will occasionally listen to the Beatles and the Monkees. Not so much, you know what I mean, but I play them on my computer and iTunes. That's how old I am. I still have iTunes on the old computer. So, I'm a music fan. I've really taken to instrumental music in my old age. The voices are distracting.
Mm.
Keep it a lot of it on as background. I keep a lot of music on all the time, like as background. There was background music playing when we started, but I turned it off. Probably would interfere with this recording. But look at it, I'm in the dark again. Um, yeah, so yeah, I'm still listening. I'm still listening. And I try to get out to it as often as I can. The most recent things I saw, I went up to see Madness with
Oh
some
yeah. Did
Savage
you like it?
people. Oh, it was great. But yeah, that was a group I really loved. And they had Fishbone opening for them too, who
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
great. And before that, I saw Grace Jones. I saw her at the Hammerstein Ballroom too, which was great.
Wow.
I'll tell you briefly, not to get off this topic, but like Grace Jones is somebody I got to spend a moment with 10, 12 years ago. So I was friendly with, and who helped me, and I didn't mention him either. I should mention him, but who helped me with starting the script of Sweet Lorraine was I was hanging around with Abel Ferrar when he was in his down and out period.
Mhm.
It's like between films and like he was like his reputation was kind of not in great shape. he's been rehabilitated now. He lives in Italy, married an Italian girl, had a baby with her, and he works steadily over there. He's like cleaned up. He's like not high anymore. He's not in New York, basically. I used to go hang with him, and he helped me out writing Sweet Lorraine, or starting Sweet Lorraine, or getting it started. But I can't remember the point of this story. But yeah, mentioning Abel was important, and I saw he was a help and an inspiration too. A Bad Lieutenant was always like it was like a real favorite film when it came out, and of course King of New York.
Hmm.
So I don't know what's brought us to Abel though. That doesn't matter. But oh, we're talking about Grace Jones. So now
Yes.
years later, I'm walking down 23rd Street, and I'm getting near the Chelsea Hotel, and I run into Abel. And so we start talking. He's like, "Oh, come on up. Come on up. I got Grace is upstairs, and she's hanging out." So I walk to his room, and Grace Jones is laying on the couch. She had just came back from the United, like from England. She exiled herself when George Bush was in office. She no people threatened to leave. If he gets elected, I'm leaving the country. She actually did leave the country. She went to Europe. Now she's back here in 2000. Probably it's 2010, 2011, and she's up there with a hangover. But I walked in, and he introduced us. Before she said hello, she burped at me. She burped at me. But then she moved her feet back and let me sit on the couch, and we had a nice like we talked for an hour. She told me about her life. We were watching like a gospel show on TV, and her family are like ministers. Her family's like preachers. Um, and she grew up in the church, so she was watching the gospel hour, and we had a nice talk. She was just a really like the coolest, like of all the people I've met. I've met quite a few people over the years. She was like the hippest, coolest like person, like as far as cool goes. Whatever you think of as cool, she was the hippest person I ever encountered, and Abel introduced me.
Grace Jones turned up at the Pipeline one night.
Look at that. Where was I? You said hello to her?
Amelia was telling me back in the old days, it may have even been like DJ Freaks era or just after
Uh-huh.
DJ Freaks.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
like 10 people there, and fucking Grace Jones walks in and hangs out at the bar.
Yeah, she was like perfectly, like she's like so not the what you think she might be. Like she's very like she was really down to earth, and like she was just really like a very very nice, like just a very nice person, like real engaging, and like ready to like talk to you, like talk to you about your life. Tell me about yourself, Joel. You know what I mean, like that. She was all of that, and she was just a very gracious. She was so that was nice. That was like my favorite celebrity moment. If I I've had a few, but that was like my favorite celebrity. And I remember seeing her back in the day, but like I was really happy. I rushed out and got myself a ticket that I couldn't afford to go see her a little while back. And it's on the show. The whole show is on YouTube. Like Grace Jones at the Hammerstein Ballroom 2023, and there she'll be. It's great. She's great.
Yeah, I'm blown away she's still out there touring. I had no idea.
She's like kind of in her own league in many ways. I think.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I think she's in her 70s now. She's like 10 years older than me, or maybe 8 or 9 years older than me. Anyway, cool lady.
That, you mentioned Grace Jones and how cool she was. From my experience, whether it's being a musician in the industry or as a journalist, whatever it may be, the higher up somebody is on the success ladder, let's call it, the
Yeah.
less of an asshole they tend to be. It's when you get like the indie people or the halfway theirs, they're the pains in the ass. You know what I mean? But like the higher up you
I
get, the
do. I
cooler
do.
they
Yeah, I
are,
do.
you know?
Yeah, it's funny. The real, like the really big people that I've met, like a guy like Al Pacino or like that, they're perfectly treating you like an equal.
Yeah.
Wasn't like a celebrity worship thing, or like Al, like tell me about this, or tell me about like Dog Day Afternoon, or tell it wasn't none of this shit going around. It was just like normal, nor was like perfectly natural. It wasn't like any high-handed, like kind of like, I'm I'm cooler than you kind of shit. It was like none of that.
I always find that to be a sign of insecurity.
Oh, it's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's like, yeah. And you see a lot of that in the film world. You see a lot of it in the music business, the art, and they say the fine arts business, like the real, like that's like the highest echelon of the arts, like being a painter or being like a installer, they're making installations or whatever you do. They said that's the cattiest, bitchiest of them all. Like they say, music business is here, the film business is up here as horrible goes, and then like the fine arts, they're like the worst of.
Mm.
You really have to like sacrifice your blood if you've made it to the top of the food chain in that the world. You know, you got a lot of fortitude.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's pretense everywhere. There's
Mm.
artifice everywhere. The important thing is to recognize it when you see it and not buy into it. I lived in LA for a bunch of years. You know,
Oh,
you drown in that shit out there.
yeah, well, my experiences in LA are all nice because I did, and really like in the film thing, I never really wanted to be like Fred. He suggested it to me, write a script, and I'll produce this one. I didn't have that kind of ambition. I really was like a guy who was like, I wouldn't say I'm a standoffish person, but I was like tight-lipped because I was a drug dealer. I didn't really like want to, people asking me questions all the time. Like, I don't really want to answer your questions, and I don't want to be known as that in the scene because I'm setting myself up to be robbed or anything could happen, or I could have the people take a disliking to they call the police and like, I'm going to be getting pulled over on the way home in my car. So I was like unto myself in a way. People I knew, and I was nice to everybody, but I wasn't like really like looking to like, socialize too much. But yeah, it's I tell you, it's a tough thing to navigate all of that. Like the business is, I never really wanted, I was really happy doing these films on my own. So it took 4 or 5 years to make it. So like, what else was I doing? I was working on this film, so it took 5 years. There's no deadline, and I can plan accordingly. This whole thing, like with Sweet Lorraine, it was like we're there, and it's like we got to like knock this out in 17 days, and like, but it's like a big whirlwind of a rush and a pain in the ass, and all these personalities and all this chaos. I didn't really want that. I'm really like looking for a calm, like existence. Peaceful. I'm not up for that, but I thought I was. My life, like really, I lived it the way I did because like I was unto myself, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to get dragged down. I didn't want to join a pecking order. I didn't want to like be part of like any kind of hierarchy or anything. I didn't want to lord my great talent as a film director over anybody. You know what I mean? I didn't want to do that. Treat everybody the same. But it's like it's really not like that out there. It's like a lot of catty bullshit that in New York is like it's terrible. Like it could be very nice people here too, but it's like a lot to navigate. And I wasn't like really like street smart or like really business smart at all. I was just a guy like looking to do what he wanted to do more than anything. Like I'll be a filmmaker. So there I go. But I didn't want to be I didn't want to be part of the organization really. So I got dragged into it. I'm happy for it. It gave me an arc in my life. I got to work with Tatum and all that. I get to see her on People magazine every couple of years. She turns up on there. Um, so, overall, I don't regret any decisions. I didn't get married. And all the married people tell me that's like the one intelligent thing you've ever done, Chris. It's like you didn't get married. But I don't believe them. I would have married a couple of my girlfriends. I would have married, but it just never happened. It never worked out. And I'm not a great catch. You know what I mean? It's like I was a party head through all these relationships. Anybody I could have married, they looked at me and like this guy's like not serious about it. He doesn't know what marriage is really. He doesn't know like what he'd be getting into. He's not cut out for. And it's probably true. I'm really not cut out for. I'm not. I try my damnedest, But like, yeah, relationships are, they're tough things to. You can't do everything. I couldn't have lived the life I did without
Well, that's it. Now because you're a single man and I've been a single man again for a couple of years. Um, we can talk for 3 hours about buy our records and punk rock and the Orbitons. So we made out, we won.
Yeah, I think so too. And you hear that, you go like, I read a little thing from Charles Bukowski the other day, and he said like, you made it through, like life without really like punching a time clock or doing what you want to do, basically, then you're very successful. It doesn't really matter all the other stuff. Oh, well, you're not a millionaire. You don't have like, all the things you don't have. You don't have a wife. You don't have any real kind of security or any of this kind of stuff. But you got to live by your own how you wanted to, and I'll take that any day. After high school, then the Navy and all these other institutions I was involved with, I didn't want to be because and like I've said, all of these places they all remind me of high school or junior high school, more to the point,
Right. Right.
including like the music scene or like the film world or anything. It's all very much that people kissing up and kicking down.
Yes.
The line I really like. I heard it recently. Kicking up, kissing up and kicking down. Yeah, there's a lot of that going around, and I'm not really cut out for it. I'm like too emotional, or I'm too, I'm sensitive. I'm a little sensitive. I can't like really hack that kind of a world, where I have to scratch and claw with people and fend off my rivals and like be like a uber competitive with everybody. It's like I never felt that way, and when people are like that towards me, it hurts my feelings.
Mm.
Really. I'm not putting out that vibe, but I'm like getting it back from somebody. It's like, oh God, calm down. We're all in this together. Is how I feel about it.
Yeah, and if you do good work, it will find an audience. It may not be millions of people, but sometimes it's better not to have millions of people.
Yeah, I don't need that. Like I said, I just a screening or some appreciation of anything I do. And that's great for me. I can't really ask for more. I'm not looking to like now suddenly get paid like somebody's going to pay me to like to run the orbitrons. Whatever. I don't really have to do that. I'm happy just to run it and whatever happens with it. But if somebody's entertained by it, that's everything for me, really. I made them for something. I didn't make them for me to sit around watching or for me to edit them for the rest of my life. I want people to see them. And now they're in better shape. They're convenient. You don't have to show up with a print. You just go, here's the Vimeo link and go, you're projected in your place. And
Right.
now the quality of these projectors, now you can go to a bar and it looks better than in some movie theaters.
Yeah,
Some
definitely.
low rent movie theaters, if they don't have up to date projection. But yeah, so uh, here I am. I'm on the road to 64. I haven't retired, and I plan on going on and carrying on. And my next big project is opening up for a morning noise.
Nice.
Pass that on to Kami Kaprowski if you speak to him before me.
Oh, he'll be watching this.
Yeah, good, good.
Do the right thing, Tommy.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
your goddamn wife. Do the right thing.
Yeah, they'll love it. They'll love the Fledermaus out in Jersey, but Nazis in Newark.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, we have talked the ever-loving shit out of this stuff. And I really appreciate you coming on, giving me so much time, man. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Oh, really, thank you for having me because I have nowhere to go like this. You give me like a moment, 3 hour, been here for 3 hours talking to you about me and my movies and like my associations with music and all. That's, you're doing me a huge favor. It's like, it's a huge thing for me because it's not like, people are lining up to like interview me or like ask me lots of questions about my life. There's a lot of things I haven't told you yet either. I left out all this. I think
Well,
we covered a lot though. Yeah.
I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm a fan of your work, especially with the films. I will definitely be at your event in October. And we'll definitely keep in touch then. And when your next project, wherever that may be, comes out, please come back on. We'll continue the conversation.
Well, I really thank you for that invitation, and yeah, yes, I am like I really yeah, I really appreciate that you did this, and I would like to I'm in the dark again. I would like to see some of your journalism or some of your writing if you know where if you have a place where it's available, or if you have a book that you're selling, or you have a website or whatever that you have any of your stuff on. Would love to see it because
Yeah,
it-
I gotta print up a few more of them, but my most recent book, I have a sneaking suspicion you'll get it. After watching Sweet Lorraine, I think you'll get my latest book. I'm gonna send you a copy. I'll be in touch with you about that.
oh, please do. Like I said, I'll read. I look forward to reading that. I like to, because uh, I like to. I have a lot to learn in this world, though. Still, a lot of like. I think I got some miles in front of me still for some reason. Even though they're dropping like flies all around, like I think I'm going to be carrying on a while. So yeah, please stay in touch, and I can't thank you enough, though, really, because I hope that this is not too disjointed or like it's like a big rambling mess. I hope it's coherent speech I'm giving you anyway.
I've enjoyed every second of this, man. I really do hope we do this again sometime. So, well, please consider the door always open. If when you ever want to come back on, we'll light it up immediately, man. You got my
Yeah, because it's funny because when this ends, then I'll go, oh Christ, I should have mentioned this to him. But I'm glad I mentioned I mentioned plenty for now. I'm out of breath, and so yeah, no, thank you for that. And I said really can't thank you enough for having me. It's like really, it's a huge thing for me because, like I said, I'm not a publicity machine myself. And it's gonna help me. 'Cause I'll see my thousands and thousands of followers on Instagram, and they'll all see this now. So it can only turn out well for me.
right on, man. And
I'm putting my foot in my mouth the whole way, and then it's another story.
no, I want everybody who watches this or who subscribes to my channel to check out, at the very least, Sweet Lorraine and the Orbitrons. You got to watch those two movies, man. They're essential.
If they like them, they may pick up on all the crap that's in between them too. So that's great. So keep on waving the Ghost Limb banner. It was all I can ask you. But thank you, and please, stay in touch. And I said I'll stay in touch with you. I see you. You're on Facebook often enough, right? Are you on Instagram too?
Nah.
No, you're not missing anything.
I use Facebook because it's a necessity, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Not just for this sort of thing, but I have friends everywhere, and it's difficult to pick up a phone, unfortunately. And it's easier to, see how people are doing just by going through the
Go look
feed.
at their pictures. Yeah.
I hate social media. But having said that, Facebook is the only platform I've actually been able to tolerate enough to be on.
Yeah, that's the problem with it. It is easy to take. You don't know, you don't realize that it's rotting your brain, but like because you don't feel it. But it's like, and it does. I'm finding more and more it does have this addictive quality to it that like I really don't like about it. I am kind of resentful of it all, but like I still roll with it and I still check it every morning. So it's like I'm on there. I just it's another reason to kick myself at the end of the day. Oh man, I spent like 4 hours like scrolling through Facebook, hitting like for every time a picture of Slade goes by, hit the love button.
Well,
So it's
that's
all
important. That's important. Like
I
loving
love the
Slade
Wolverine.
photos, fucking with Kaprowski. There are valuable reasons to be on Facebook, but
Yeah. No, I can't say I don't enjoy it, but it's just something hateful about it or something about it that irritates me, but I'm sticking with it.
yeah. Well, I will see you there and elsewhere, my friend. Thank you again.